Chase and Suzanne. If you can take a seat, we are going to get started. What is going on, everyone? How's everybody doing? All right. We are back after 2 years of the pandemic, so we are so excited to be here, and we have an amazing show for everybody. I'm going to move this up a little bit now that everyone's looking at me. I'm too tall for this. All right. They thought, I think they got me mixed up with the other Herman. He's about a foot shorter. So we are going to get started. Good morning and welcome. Buenos días y bienvenidos. Welcome to Los Cien's 9th Annual State of the Latino Community Address. We have a fantastic program set up today, and we, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Herman G. Hernandez, and my pronouns are he, him, el, and I'm the proud executive director of Los Cien, the premier Latino leadership group of the North Bay. Si necesita traducción, tenemos audífonos donde se puede escuchar toda la conversación, traducida por Betsy Chavez, que está allí atrás. Tenemos los audífonos acá en esta pared y Mónica y Betsy les pueden dar los audífonos. Muchísimas gracias a Betsy y a toda nuestra comunidad que habla español que está aquí con nosotros. Gracias. All right, so who is the funny person that put the wrong picture for the executive director here? That is not me. That's the chair of Los Cien. So we'll go. That's still the incorrect title for the right person. Herman J is the board chair. Okay, there we go. That's more like it. So just so everybody knows, I confuse my dad and I too. So if you do it, don't worry about it. At this point, we would like to do our land acknowledgement. Los Cien gives gratitude to the Coast Miwok and Southern Pomo, who for millennia have carefully stewarded and cared for this land, the forests, and the soil. We celebrate all that can be learned together today and into the future, as we honor this cultural wisdom for many generations to come. Now, our first order of business, we want to welcome our students who are with us today. We have students from Elsie Allen High School, Roseland University Prep, Santa Rosa City Schools, Healdsburg High, 10,000 Degrees, Santa Rosa Junior College, and of course, Sonoma State University. Will the students please stand up? Students, stand up. Let me hear you. Let me see you. Let's give them some love. All right. That is our future right there. Welcome, students. Thank you so much for being with us today. Next, we want to welcome our community engagers, our DLAC groups, and parent groups. We have community leaders from Roseland CBI and Equidad, Mujeres Unidas de Roseland, 4Cs Parent Voices, La Familia Sana, Healdsburg DLAC, Santa Rosa City Schools DLAC, Corazon Healdsburg, and other community engagers. I'm sorry if I missed some of you. But will our parent groups and associations please stand and let's give them a nice warm welcome. Awesome. Thank you so much. Gracias por estar aquí. I know we're shy, so thank you for being here. Now I'd like to make you all aware and remind some of you that please leave your contact information with myself or Monica Avina, who's right over there. We coordinate what we call access tickets. So today, 25% of the crowd is here at no cost. That includes our students and our community groups. Thanks to the generous donations of our Puente y Ganas donors, we were able to raise over $60,000, and we will continue to be doing this until that money runs out. So that'll be till 2050. So thank you very much. If you want to get on the access ticket list because you organize youth, work with high schools, or work with adult groups, please give us your contact info and we'd be happy to hit you up when we have access tickets available. Now we want to recognize our current and former elected officials, but I went through the list and we have over 40 elected officials. So due to the lack of time, I'm not like the other Herman. I like to stick to my script and stick to our timeline. Instead of listing off their names, we ask that our electeds with us today please stand and let's give them a huge round of applause and thank you for your service. Thank you so much. Now, the work of Los Cien is made possible and remained possible through the pandemic because of our awesome and amazing partners and members. We want to take a moment to thank our premier partners and event sponsors for their investment and partnership in Los Cien's mission. We'll start off by saying, like Herman J. says, muchísimas gracias, and a heartfelt abrazo. To our premier partners, the Community Foundation Sonoma County, the Luther Burbank Center for the Arts, Sonoma Clean Power, the Press Democrat La Prensa, Sonoma County Ag and Open Space District, Kaiser Permanente, Redwood Credit Union, and Petaluma Health Center. Thank you very much. Let's give them a nice round of applause. And now we want to thank our event sponsors, kicking us off with Exchange Bank, Western Health Advantage, Sonoma Land Trust, Carlo Rodriguez and Jill Ravitch from the DA-elect and the outgoing DA, Sonoma Water, Sonoma County Office of Education, First Five Sonoma County, Keysight Technologies, and of course, Sonoma State University. Last but not least, we want to make sure to give some serious love and some profound thank yous to our 2022 State of the Latino Community Address Committee. After 60 plus hours and several months of planning and coordination, we are here today, and there's absolutely no way that we would be here without them. I'm going to read their names, and then if the planning committee are in the room, I'd like you to please stand. So we're going to start off with Ellen Velasquez Muralles, Fernando Carrillo, Grace Chung Schulman, who's actually taking our photographs today, Herman J. Hernandez, Carrie Fugit, Kirsten Lange, Lanny Medina, Monica Avina, Oscar Chavez, Patrick McDonald, Sylvia Limas, Todd Mendoza, and Veronica Vences. Thank you all very much. Now, Los Cien is all about Latinx leadership and empowerment in Sonoma County. Our vision is essential and simple. Our vision is all about instilling orgullo, pride in Spanish, in our community and uplifting our Latinx voice through equity and action in Sonoma County. We are honored to continue to be a trusted organization in Sonoma County that continues to have difficult, critical, and honest conversations focused on issues that impact, illuminate, and elevate the Latino community challenges and experiences. Our intention here is not to alienate, but to build bridges towards solutions and change that empower all community members. We are committed to holding these difficult conversations because what affects the Latinx community affects everyone who calls Sonoma County home. Now, the state of the Latino community. We are so thrilled to be back. The last 2 years have been virtual, but the content has been 100 and amazing. But we are thrilled to be back here once again at Sonoma State University. And thank you, Sonoma State, for allowing us to bring back this incredible event and continue to bring panels and speakers so that our community can learn and be inspired. A little side note, I have a lot to be grateful to SSU for. 7 years ago today was when I had the great honor of speaking at the State of Latino Community Address about being young and involved in my community. Little did I know that my future wife was sitting in the audience. After the event, she walked up to me and said, "Hey, I'd like to get involved." And some of you know what happened next. So I kind of digress, but that did happen 7 years ago. My main point is a lot of incredible things happen at this annual event, outside from learning and being inspired by our speakers and panels. So community members meet elected officials they would otherwise not have access to. Students meet their future internship or job opportunities. Community leaders from different sectors exchange information that leads to meetings that lead to progress. And some of us meet our future significant others. So we encourage you to meet your neighbors, check out the vendors outside, and make new friends. And as a matter of fact, our amazing program manager, Monica Avina, an alumni of Sonoma State, attended her first Los Cien event here 5 years ago and is now part of the Los Cien team. So it's pretty amazing what could happen here. Today we have close to 600 people in the room. And as we enter our third year of the pandemic, we cannot forget the challenges we have endured and the pain borne by so many in our BIPOC, undocumented, and low-income communities. Like a fast-moving wildfire, we witnessed the pandemic ravage and destroy the lives of those living on the edge of opportunity and under the weight of an unequal system rooted in racial and systemic inequities. Today, we are students who are learning how we go from recovery to restructuring. We're going to be presented with data. We're going to be listening to perspectives. People will be speaking their truths, and we're going to be listening to real-life experiences. Today is about soaking everything in and listening to understand, not listening to respond or resist. Restructuring is not easy. It involves changing how we do things, moving away from status quo, moving away from the system we have grown to be accustomed to, and moving into spaces that make us feel uncomfortable, taking risks, and remembering that if all lives truly matter, we have to prove through action, consistent and repetitive action, that Black lives matter first. I would be lying to you if I said that talking about race, white supremacy, skin color, systemic inequities, and other topics of that nature did not make me feel nervous or uncomfortable, because it does. We know change is not an event, it is a process. It is a painful, hard, and long, but beautiful process. Change is also a commitment. We have seen the start of some significant changes and commitments throughout Sonoma County, even throughout our state and nation. And you're going to hear about them today. But it seems that every time we take 5 steps forward, we end up taking 3 steps back. If we truly are serious and committed to equity, we need to say what the kids say. We need to stop talking about it, and we need to be about it. An organization, thank you. An organization's diversity, equity, and inclusion statement or commitment to DEI is nothing more than words. What matters is what you do. Each and every one of you in this room. What matters is what you do day in and day out. Actions absolutely speak louder than any type of DEI statement or words. My homeboy, the MC for today, Mr. Oscar Chavez, said this early on in the planning process for this event. If we're going to repair these unfair systems, we must start where the pain has been the hardest, where the trauma has been the deepest, and where the disadvantage has been the starkest. What I believe Oscar was alluding to was this. When we start at the root of what causes systemic injustice, when we speak the truth, when we authentically apply equity through action, we know we will have an honest chance at the most incredible opportunity to reimagine a new social and economic construct that best supports those who are at the greatest risk of continuing to be casualties of an unfair system. In today's program, you might notice, we are shifting our focus to not just our Latinx community, as most of our guests are accustomed to, but we are embracing and connecting with our Black African American brothers and sisters, our Indigenous and Native American communities, and our Asian and Pacific Islander communities. And it's not stopping today. The 2022 update of the Portrait of Sonoma County demonstrated that many issues felt in the Latino community are also felt by the Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. This is a key reason why we have designed today's event on building trust and convening a conversation on how to continue building multiracial unity so we can address these issues together. As Herman J. says, we appreciate you being at the table with all of us. As you know, it is much better to be at the table than on the... Okay, that was a little awkward, but anyways. You guys are still waking up. I'll give you a pass. It's much better to be at the table than on the menu. I want to thank everyone again for being here. And before I introduce our next speaker, I want to remind everyone that Los Cien, you're going to get a taste of what Los Cien normally does. This is a longer type of program, but usually we have luncheons and special events focused on community issues that are about an hour to 2 hours long. But Los Cien is doing a party, a social. It's called Dia de Los Cien. So please save the date, and actually, don't save the date. Buy your tickets now. I literally started 2 months ago, and I tell everyone, buy your tickets now because, as a lot of you may have heard, this event sold out a month ago, and we had a wait list of close to 80 people. We now have 7 local Latino-owned restaurants that are going to be serving some tasty appetizers: Sazon Peruvian Cuisine, Barrio Fresca Cocina Mexicana, Paradise Burger and Kitchen, Las Cazuelas, Guiso, Latin Fusion, and Picasso Cafe. We're also going to be sharing our Latino vintners who will be pouring at the event. The event is on November 3rd. There are flyers on your table. There are no excuses, because if we sell out, we're going to put you on a wait list. There's literally a QR code. You can buy your ticket now. It's going to be at the Luther Burbank Center. And we just confirmed that we're going to have, it's not technically a competition, but our members in our community here will be able to participate in an altar decoration exhibit. We only have 12 spaces available, so we are going to be sharing more information through our newsletter. But if we encourage all of you to attend, we encourage all of you to participate. Now, if I haven't said it enough, I want to thank Sonoma State leadership once again for hosting us for a 9th year in a row. It is my honor to invite Interim-President Ming-Tung Mike Lee to the stage to welcome all of us to Sonoma State. Let's give him some Los Cien love, and we hope you enjoy the show, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Ming-Tung Lee, or Mike Lee, the interim president of Sonoma State University. And I've been here 2 months. 2 months. And let me start by saying that Mr. Herman J. Hernandez is one of the very first community leaders that welcomed me and my wife to Sonoma. Thank you. Thank you. And in the last 2 months, I have the opportunity to meet many of you who are community leaders, who are people who work hard to make this community and this area prosperous. I have the opportunity to walk the campus every single day to talk to our students, our faculty, our staff, because my wife and I live on campus in Sonoma State University. And this is the best presidency of the entire CSU system. And I can tell you that. Who else can live among the students, walk in a place like a park, and go to a beautiful, wonderful Green Music Center whenever there's a wonderful performance? And you all need to try them. You all need to try them. And 2 months in, my wife and I really love the students and think we are falling in love with this place too. And I think there are many more years I think we can contribute to the advancement of our students' success and to the community's success for years to come. And we're looking forward to do that. But before that, before I give you the little bit of remark here today, I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that Sonoma State University is on was the land of the people of South Pomo and Coast Miwok. And we owe them an appreciation for what they have done with this land. And they continue to nurture what's on it and the tremendous heritage that's left behind by the wonderful people. And Sonoma State is a Hispanic Serving Institute. That means that we are given the recognition and the responsibility to do more and to do more frequent what we can do to provide the excellent quality education to all the students who want it. I am not one of your model Asian who grew up in a family that's wealthy, have tremendous educational achievement, and then send their kids to Ivy League school. My father had 3 years of school. My mom was illiterate. But they saved every penny to make sure that their son had the opportunity to go to school and get the best education I can get. I didn't disappoint them. I went through all the public school, college, master's, PhD, and now here I am, president of Sonoma State University. I share my story with many of our students whose parents work hard in the field, work hard in all the different category works that you can imagine to earn that honest dollar. So their children and their children's children will have the opportunity to get the best educational opportunity they can ever get in their life. And that's what Sonoma State is all about. So as president of this university, I'm very proud to see this full house of people who care so much about all the people out there who do not have the opportunity, do not have the privilege to get the best opportunity they can get. But I have to tell you that even in the short 2 months of time, I have seen tremendous accomplishment. Our educational school dean, she's been out there working with school districts, doing teacher residence program. Our Puente program, who are providing educational opportunity to all our students, are the finalists of the National Excelencia examples of 2022. And this is all very natural, very logical to us because we have almost 40% of our student bodies are Latinos. This is truly a Hispanic serving institution. And I walk the campus every single day. Our Latinx student organizations are also the most active. They are our future alums, they are our future leaders in our community and beyond. And obviously, it's not enough to talk about all the great things that have happened on this campus and in the community. It's also very critical for us to recognize all the challenges. And for that, I want to really appreciate what Los Cien has been doing. You can simply take a look at the scorecard on your table. Look at the achievement rate. Look at the college preparation. Look at what percentage of our Latino student population are ready for college, are going to college. There's a lot more. There's a lot more we need to do. And I have made it very clear to our team on this campus. It is wonderful what we are able to do to the students who come to us. But it's absolutely not enough because there are many more students out there who have not had the opportunity to come to us. So we cannot just do a good job on campus. We need to reach out. We need to reach out and work with all the community colleges in this area and beyond, and work with all the high schools so that more students who come from underprivileged family background are able to be prepared, get that A through G, get it ready, so you can send them all to Sonoma State. We welcome them. We want them to be here. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to really urge all of you, because you are leaders in this community. Go out whenever you can. Tell the parents, tell the students. Go to college is simply just the beginning. You need that as a door opener. Once you're able to do that, the world is yours. 40, 50 years ago, there's no way I can imagine one day I'll be standing here speaking to all of you about Sonoma State. Because many people told me that if nice, one day you could become a street vendor. It'd be wonderful if you can really start to plow the field so we can get more rice. That's what they thought of me. But you know what? I never give in, because I know I have the right intelligence. I just need the right opportunity. Plenty of people out there have this. Let's give them opportunity and make them successful. So that's what we are here for, and I'm so great to see all of you. But in the meantime, plenty of unjust things are happening. I know that the Latinx community fought hard to get the equal opportunity, but the Asian community also are struggling to try to make sure that we can stop the violence against the vulnerable people, not just Asian. It has to stop. And it takes the community to work together to say, no, you cannot do that, and whenever you do that, there will be consequences. So I thank you very much for coming. And we absolutely need to work together, because the more education we get, the more educated people we get, the stronger the voice will be, and the social justice is absolutely achievable. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for sharing an incredible story and for being an inspiration to us here, and more importantly, for opening up literally your home to Los Cien today. I know that your message is powerful, and it always inspires us when we recognize that here in this country, despite all of the challenges that we face, we have a shot at what we owe to every student, and that is a shot at the American dream. And it is our job to keep that dream alive and going for the next generation. So thank you. I want to let all of you know that earlier this month, we got a call from this individual who wanted to be part of our speakers today. And we said, look, our agenda is packed. We've been working on this for a long time. We can't fit you in. The best we can do perhaps is have you do a little short video, and we'll include it into the program. And so that's what we did. But in all seriousness, it is a great honor for me to introduce the governor of our great state, Gavin Newsom, to do a brief introduction. And welcome.
Hey everybody, it's Governor Gavin Newsom here, and I'm excited to welcome all of you to the State of Latino Address held appropriately, at Sonoma State University, which is one of our partners in our Regional Career Pipeline program supporting disadvantaged students. And that's why we're here. We're here to discuss not just today, but how today we can work together and every day to lift each other up so that all of California communities can thrive. We know that government should lead by example. And that's why just last month we created California's first Racial Equity Commission to take critical actions on equity and discrimination, helping to expand opportunity, not just rhetorically, but substantively for all. And we know that a truly prosperous California is one where communities work together, where people have a voice and choice in their government. In the last few months, we've seen diverse coalitions truly come together to help pass new laws. By the way, if you think I'm exaggerating, just consider what we just did with the climate package that prioritizes underserved communities. Bills, by the way, that will empower fast food workers as well, farm workers, and of course, so much more. We're also ensuring that communities receive critical information. Information's power, and the new Office of Community Partnerships and Strategic Communications recognizes the critical role community partners play in meeting people where they are. California is the first state, the first in the nation, and this is really, I'm really proud of this, to offer universal access to health care coverage. No other state does this, regardless of pre-existing conditions, ability to pay, regardless of your immigration status. That's California leading. And on mental health, we talk often about physical health. We also have to talk about brain health, mental health. Our master plan will ensure that everyone has increased access to behavioral health, substance abuse services. In California, we believe in supporting communities, and we know that we can, well, best do that by empowering communities. We often say, at least I often say this, success leaves clues. There's a power of emulation. A lot of people assert things, we prove things, and that's why we're seeing those clues. We're seeing that power of emulation. We're seeing results of a coalition that's building even beyond the borders of California. More diverse partnerships mean more shared ideas and shared solutions. And we're at our best. We're always at our best when we're standing together, when we support each other, we have each other's backs, and we have a little humility when we learn from each other in the process. So I just want to thank each and every one of you for all of it you do, and I hope you all have a great rest of your event.
Say that guy can be a little repetitive sometimes, but nonetheless, thank you, Governor, and next year, I promise you, we will fit you into the lineup. But now it is my honor to introduce a person who really needs no introduction, a champion of our community, and someone that when we need a voice to be there for us, we can always count on, Senator Mike McGuire. So welcome, Senator.
And I missed the stairs. So good stuff. How the heck's everybody doing? Hey, it's so good to see you. First and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. Can we please give a warm round of applause to Oscar? And let's say thank you to Herman for his incredible work as well, everybody. Come on now. I'm honored to be with you and want to say good morning. Was just talking, running down the highway and getting here and getting the kids ready to roll. Everybody's living the dream this morning, am I right? Thanks, Herman, for starting at 7. In all seriousness, though, I want to say thank you to Los Cien. Los Cien's been a game changer for this county, and we owe a debt of gratitude for bringing this county together to talk about some of the toughest issues that our communities face. Can we give a round of applause to the board of directors, to their donors? We are grateful for their incredible work on making Sonoma County and the North Bay stronger. Also couldn't be more thrilled to be able to see President Lee here at Sonoma State. And Sonoma State is so special to this community. We're so lucky to be able to have Sonoma State at the heart of Sonoma County. Can we give a round of applause, please, to the president and say thank you? And also, we have representatives from several legislative offices here today. And I want to acknowledge the offices of Senator Dodd and Assemblywoman Aguiar-Curry and Assemblymember Wood and, of course, Assemblymember Levine. We are grateful for your work. We have representatives who are here today. If you could please stand and let's give them a round of applause, please, and say thank you. I hope that you will agree with me. The Latino community is the future of California, and California must ensure the future of the Latino community is strong. Latino community has the largest population growth out of any group in the 2020 census. In fact, Latinos represent about 2/3 of California's population growth, 2/3 in the last decade. Over 15.6 million Latinos call the Golden State home. And here in California, am I right? We value our diversity. Ladies and gentlemen, our diversity is our state's strength, and California is what the future of America will look like. And here's my bottom line. Our diversity. Our diversity is what makes our communities strong and our economy, the 5th largest in the world, eat your heart out, Texas, thrive. And that is why so many in this room, and that's why so many in this room have dedicated their lives to improving the lives of others. When we work together to be able to lift up the lives of our neighbors who need help the most. And that is a California value. And I can assure you, so many have mobilized and organized in this room, I can assure you that your work is paying off. So let's get into it. There are several policy issues that drive a community to be successful, and I'd like to touch on a few today. I'd like to talk about education and opening access to our public schools and colleges, opening access to healthcare, ensuring that we have equitable housing in our community, and I'd like to talk about our collective work together on combating the climate crisis. Are you ready to talk about education, ladies and gentlemen? So I'm a firm believer, as I'm sure each and every one of you are, I'm a firm believer that the best investment that our community, that our state and our nation can make is in strong public schools and our kids. And public education is the ultimate equalizer in our society. Latinos here in California, we know this, have lower levels of educational attainment compared to the statewide average. And that's simply unacceptable. We know as a state, which is the most diverse state in our union, must do better. And we are, thanks to so many of you in this room. California has now gone from dead last in the nation in 2015 in per pupil spending. We are now in the top 20 states in spending in our public schools out of all other states in the union. We have universal school breakfast and lunch now at every public school. Study after study shows that students who go to school on an empty lunch are challenged to be successful in the classroom. Now, under the state's universal school meal program, every student, no matter your income level, every student has access to free breakfast and lunch. We have a child care crisis in this state, a child care crisis in California and throughout the North Bay, am I right? So here's the deal. We got to focus in on it and we got to solve it. So California is now funding permanently an additional 400,000 state subsidized child care slots in every county across California. Hundreds of additional slots are coming to the county of Sonoma and the county of Marin. Parents shouldn't have to choose between childcare and going to work. Are you with me, ladies and gentlemen? And if we don't learn from this pandemic, shame on us. So let's talk about the digital divide in our schools. Too many Californians are on the wrong side of the digital divide. And we know the vast majority of the students who are on the wrong side of the digital divide in the state are from communities of color. That's why the state has launched America's largest public broadband project. Nearly 7 billion strong is in the bank right now, and we're starting to build high-speed internet in rural communities and urban centers throughout this state. This funding is going to help connect urban and rural schools alike, and in those schools that have the highest rates of poverty or English language learners will get the funding first, and it's about damn time. So let's talk about opening access. Absolutely. Let's talk about college. Here's my frustration. We have the most diverse state in the union, but our college campuses don't reflect that diversity. So what's the state doing about it? Number one, we've now made the first 2 years of community college tuition, the first 2 years free to first-time college students, and about 70% of all college students are now going tuition-free to community college. We've changed the way we award the Cal Grant here in California, eliminating major barriers. The Cal Grant is one of the largest financial funding sources in the state. Hundreds of thousands of students just out of high school or those who want to go back to college now qualify for financial aid that we've reformed the programs. The vast majority of those students are those coming from students from communities of color. We have to make our college campuses as diverse as the communities where those students come from. And I'm going to get political here for a second. California will always stand strong for our diversity. So when former President Donald Trump came after Dreamers, the state of California stood up and stood strong. We provided legal assistance to Dreamers who were in college, and we provided $75 million in college scholarships. It's the right thing to do, and we will always stand strong for immigrants in this state. Are you with me, Sonoma County? So we've made progress. We have made progress in this state. We've made progress because we know that Latino enrollment has doubled in the CSU and the UC system over the last 5 years. That said, we know that much more work has to be done. Our college campuses are not as diverse as the communities of California, and we can't rest until that's a reality. I'd also like to talk about healthcare here today. We know that healthcare is essential to the quality of life of all Californians. And we know that Latino families and kids, they're less likely to be insured in this state. And you heard the governor just talk about that a few times over and over. That's why California has made healthcare a human right. No matter your immigration status, no matter your immigration status here in California, you have access to health benefits in the Golden State via the Medi-Cal public health system. We just increased the rates of paid family leave as well for low-income workers. We've gone from 60% of their wage to 90% of their wage for the first 12 weeks, and I want to talk about why that is so important. About two-thirds of minimum wage workers in California are women. And the majority of those women come from communities of color. That woman should not have to choose between going to work and taking care of her family. We've also expanded, absolutely. We've also expanded reproductive health care benefits in the state of California, regardless of income level. And I want to talk with you about Proposition 1. And no matter what the federal government will do, if it's a war on women or a war on immigrants, California will always stand strong, and let's talk about Proposition 1. Proposition 1 will be on your November ballot that will forever enshrine a woman's right to reproductive health care, contraception, and access to abortion services here in the Golden State. And mark my word, the Golden State will always stand strong for a woman's right to reproductive freedom. Are you ready to go? So look, we can't have a thriving community, a thriving state, if we don't build more housing. And I got to tell you, this housing crisis is one of the greatest in our state's history. Erica and I got our first house, and we were barely able to live in the community that we grew up in. And it, you can tell, makes me emotional. And I got to tell you that crisis that we all face, it threatens the long-term viability of our communities big and small throughout this state. It's also one of the biggest threats to our economy. Californians, who are the heart of this economy, our workforce, can't afford to live in the state that they love. 78% of extremely low-income Californians pay more than half of their income. They pay more than half of their annual income to rent. The lack of affordable housing is now one of the largest drivers of homelessness in the state of California. And only about 25% of all Californians, 25%, can afford to buy a house in this state. This is not sustainable, nor is it acceptable. And that is why the state just took momentous action to be able to build thousands of additional housing units. Just yesterday, the governor signed a suite of bills presented by the legislature that represents a turning point for the Golden State, a turning point that will speed up the process to get dirt moved and housing built, cutting bureaucratic red tape and years off of the approval process for thousands of housing units in every corner of this state. The bills that were just signed into law will drive down the cost of development, and it's going to revitalize our urban centers and small downtowns. And this state action will create thousands of jobs that will provide family-sustaining wages. And we also know that we're not going to be able to build housing without helping with the cost. So over the last 3 years, the state has invested $8 billion in workforce affordable housing. $8 billion. That has now helped build 46,000 additional units. And over the next 18 months, the state will be delivering another $6 billion that will build thousands of additional units in every corner of California, and we need to keep up this pace. And I want to turn to homelessness. On homelessness, it's an all-hands-on-deck approach to be able to tackle the crisis that exists on our streets every night. And I want to thank the nonprofit leaders who are here today, who are on the streets every night working with residents who are homeless in Sonoma County. I want to thank the mayors and council members and members of the Board of Supervisors who have had such a focus on homelessness. I want to tell you that this crisis, in my belief, it's appalling. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable that we're one of the largest economies in the world, yet we accept nearly 170,000 of our neighbors are on the streets every night. By the way, a quarter of them are veterans. 25%. So I'm a big believer that Californians are tired of the government simply managing the crisis. Am I right? Californians want decisive action to solve this crisis. And that's why the state is advancing the boldest homeless services and housing action plan in our state's history. This action plan since 2020 has invested over $80 million to build hundreds of units of permanent housing units wrapped with addiction and mental health services right here in Sonoma County, along with additional shelter beds. And we know this isn't enough, so I want to quickly talk about a controversial issue that you're going to hear about more and more over the next 2 years, and that's Care Court. Care Court has just been founded. We're working with the state court system on launching it over the next 24 months. Care Court will compel thousands of California residents who are the hardest to house due to mental health and addiction to seek treatment through tougher conservatorship laws. So coming in the next 24 months, judges will be able to compel residents into a facility that will have locked doors for up to 24 months. And during those 2 years, those residents will receive intense addiction services and mental health counseling, and they will be guaranteed an individual placement plan coming out of the facility for permanent housing and ongoing services. And I promise you, we're working day and night to be able not to manage the crisis, but to fix this crisis and get people housed. I want to end it with the climate crisis. The alarm bells couldn't be louder. We know here in California and throughout the American West, the climate crisis is evolving faster than anticipated. And we also know that the climate crisis is adversely impacting communities of color, in particular, Black and brown families. The grip of the climate crisis is tightening, and its impacts are dangerous. The American West has become drier over the past 30 years, and extreme heat is now the #1 weather-related killer in the United States of America. And we all know this too well. Wildfires have never been larger or more destructive than they are right now. And that is why that California needs to step up and lead once again and take nation-leading action on the climate crisis. And that's exactly what we've done. The legislature now signed into law by Governor Newsom. Bills that are now becoming laws have been passed. And we also set a record-setting $54 billion climate action budget. Now, these bills and the budget's going to accelerate California's clean energy policy goals. It's going to set more ambitious targets to be able to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We're going to be bringing on thousands of additional megawatts of power, green power from offshore wind, onshore wind, commercial solar, and geothermal. We're going to build larger clean energy power plants that will shore up our grid at a faster pace. We're going to establish setbacks from oil wells in predominantly communities of color. We're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at a faster clip, and we're going to provide the hardest hit communities. And let's just be blunt and call it what it is. Communities where African American and Latino kids live We're going to start implementing setbacks to oil wells up to 3,000 feet. You shouldn't have an oil well in your damn neighborhood and expect that community to thrive. And we're going to invest billions to be able to ensure that our communities are becoming more wildfire safe. Do we have a lot of work in front of us? You're absolutely right, we do. But this action that's been taken by the state represents some of the most consequential action taken by any state in the United States of America. And I want to end it right here. And I want to say thank you. Thank you for your incredible work. When you look around this room, it's packed on a Thursday morning. It's packed on a Thursday morning with folks who want change in our county, who want to bring change to our region. And I'm a firm believer, no matter what you may hear on cable news, I'm a firm believer that California will always be the land of opportunity. But I got to tell you, we got to continue to work hard. We got to continue to work together to ensure that the California dream remains strong. We can't afford to ignore the tough issues that face us. And we can't ignore those tough issues, especially if it brings on tough conversations or decisions, just like Herman said in the very beginning. And no matter what happens at the federal level, this state will always stand strong for the values that have helped make us great. We're going to stand strong for our diversity. We're going to stand strong for our inclusion. We are going to stand strong for our mission to always be on the forefront of technology and innovation. And of course, we're going to stand strong for the people. Because we know that this state wouldn't be successful without the people of California, the most diverse state in the United States of America. I want to say thank you for this opportunity. It is so good to see you. Let's give one more round of applause to Los Cien. Thank you so much for having me. And let's have a wonderful day. Thank you, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, another truly round of applause for the hardest working man here in Sonoma County and in Sacramento. And Betsy Chavez, did you get all that? Were you able to interpret all that? All right. I know that was a lot. You must probably need a little break. This morning, I forgot my glasses at home. And so I ran to the car, and I managed to find some readers. I don't know if they're mine or my wife's, but they're not really working too well. And so I'm not able to read my notes. But it says here that I'm supposed to do a little overview of the state of the Latino community. But I got to tell you, I think Herman did a fantastic job, and I think he probably took my notes. And so I'm just going to add on to what he said. But before I do that, I just want to honor and recognize the beautiful diversity that is out here in the audience. If you could stand from where I'm standing here, this is really what a diverse community should look like. So let us recognize the importance of having a big tent, an inclusive tent that really brings together the diversity and perspective and voices of our community. Before I go on, I want to just acknowledge the fact that we are here after being away for a number of years. This pandemic has created so much pain and hurt for so many members of our community. We've lost loved ones, friends that we knew. And so in honor of all of those that we have lost, I'd like to invite you to have a moment of silence for all of those that we lost in the pandemic. Thank you. And in appreciation of all of those essential workers and frontline workers who put their lives on the line so that we could be safe, let us give them a round of applause in appreciation of their hard work. Now, our theme today is about moving us from recovery to transformation. And I want to urge us to really think hard about what that means. It is not trying to go back to the way things were, because the way things were not good at all for so many members of our community, especially our BIPOC community. So the way that we move forward is really about reimagining a new construct, a new system, a new way of being. And I'm so encouraged that across the state, we are learning, and if there's a silver lining to the pandemic, is that it forced us to break free from our calcified way of thinking, of moving away from this idea that this is the way we've always done it. We can't do that. We can't provide these benefits for those individuals. It shattered all of those assumptions that we had. And so we are in a moment in time where we can reconstruct a new system that is more responsive to the needs of our community, a new system that is more fair and that can truly provide economic mobility and greater opportunity for so many more members of our community. That is our challenge today, and we invite you to be part of this dialogue. We're going to hear a perspective from other regions. There is great work that is happening. At the state level and at the federal level, new legislation is requiring that we center equity in our decision making. We're going to hear examples of what that really means. There is a call to really focus on community engagement in a new and authentic way. We're going to explore how that is happening here and in other parts of the community. And as Herman said, which is what I was going to say, that we are needing and recognizing that we can't do this alone. That if you look at the portrait of Sonoma data, our Latino community has struggled. But it's not just the Latino community. As it has been said before, it is also our Black and Asian Pacific Islander community, our Native American community. So we need to lift the concern of all of those communities, and we need data. And this is why that Portrait of Sonoma report is so important to the work that we do. This is why having a scorecard is so important, so that we can all level set and work off the same playbook. Because we know that when we build knowledge together, we get to solutions faster. And this is what this is all about. Let us build knowledge together to get to solutions faster. And so I hope that you will be inspired by what we are going to do today. And I invite you not to sit on the sidelines, but to get engaged, to lead with a great sense of urgency, because our community needs you. We need you to make our community better for the next generation. So at this point, I would like to invite our first panel. We have, this is about moving beyond our boundaries. I'd like to welcome Dr. Micah Weinberg, who's Chief Executive Officer for California Forward, Melissa Jones, who's the Executive Director of the Bay Area Regional Health Inequities Initiative, otherwise known as BARHI, and Max Vargas, who's the Vice President of Economic Justice, Latino Community Foundation. And they're going to each talk for about 5 to 7 minutes about what they're doing across the state and what their organizations are doing and how we are transforming the way that we are showing up and coming together. At the end of each of their presentations, we're going to do a panel discussion. And if there is time, we have Sylvia and Lanny who will be taking questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand. They'll give you a little card. They'll write it down, bring it to me. And if we have time, we will ask the question of our panelists. There is no break, so if you need to get up and go to the bathroom, please feel free to do that. So we will go ahead and get started, and I'd like to invite Dr. Weinberg to kick us off.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Oscar. It's so good to be back in this room, which is, among other things, a room of people who understand what an awesome dude Oscar Chavez is. So good to, when he's like, hey, can you come do this again? I'm like, absolutely. I had the privilege of seeing you folks, I think, like 4 and 5 years ago. And it's just so wonderful to be back here in person, and to be really celebrating with all of you. This is a very celebratory room. and the energy is really, really wonderful. I was a little worried about the senator, whether he was going to, make it through the whole excited talk with his voice still intact, but appreciated everything that he said there. So I run an organization with a funny name, called California Forward, right? And our mission is to make California's economy and government work for everyone in all the state's regions. And that last piece is really important. And so what we've done is we partner with a bunch of groups in what we call our California Stewardship Network. And Oscar has been a leader of that network since its inception over a decade ago. And the reason why we do it this way is because we don't really think that you can sort of rearrange the interest group deck chairs on the Titanic in Sacramento in yet another way and get a better set of outcomes for the state of California. We really need to be building new partnerships across regions, partnerships across communities, partnerships across ethnicities, partnerships across parties, in order to have a better set of outcomes for the people in our state. And so it's just been really wonderful to learn from Oscar and so many of the regional leaders that are a part of our California Stewardship Network. We were privileged to have Herman, the younger. You got Pliny the younger and elder, and we have Herman the younger and elder here in Sonoma County. Has that joke been made before? It's a good one. Okay, cool. I'm going to use that like 15 more times. Okay. In any case, we were very privileged to have him as one of our Morgan Fellows, which is a program where we really work on creating steward leaders, which is, a distinction from, it's really important. There are a lot of folks that are sort of like hard edge advocates and like, we're gonna come at you, right? And a lot of the things people are coming at you for are good things, right? But we do need some people that are going to bring folks together, right? And that understand how to, we talk about diversity being strength, and it is strength, but it's also important, that it's also challenging sometimes if you're having real conversations, right? We do a lot of economic development work across the state, and often those economic development conversations have to start with racial healing. And if they don't start with acknowledging how the economy got to be the way that it is, then we're not really going to tackle these economic development processes in a way that is going to fundamentally change the structures of our economies. So we're really lucky to have Herman and so many other young leaders coming through this fellowship program to learn about how to bring diverse groups of people together and help steward them towards a better outcome. Then we throw a little party. This year, we're throwing this party in Oscar's hometown of Bakersfield, California. So I hope to see some of you. I know I'll be seeing Oscar at the California Economic Summit in Bakersfield. And that's where we bring people together to work on all the different things that we do over the course of the year, whether it's housing, workforce development, broadband, wildfires. If it's almost impossible to deal with, we're there. And then the other thing that we do is we really move it around the state. We were really grateful to have Santa Rosa and Sonoma County as our host in 2018 for the Economic Summit. Did a big call to action around wildfires that did have some influence on the state taking a different approach to forest management than it had before. And so we like to sort of introduce the state to itself. And there's probably no place in California that needs to be introduced to the rest of California more than Kern County, right? And the reason is, and many of you know this, right? I mean, a lot of people, so I'm from Oakland, a lot of people in the Bay Area, if they think about Kern County at all, which largely they don't, right? Even though energy, food, water, a lot of important stuff comes from there, they think about Kevin McCarthy, right? And your mileage may vary. Some people think about Kevin McCarthy and get very happy inside. Some people think about Kevin McCarthy and get very angry inside. And there are all kinds of people in this room that probably feel all kinds of ways. But there's a lot going on in Kern County, right? It's a very diverse place, diverse demographically, diverse economically, diverse topographically. And we believe that if people understand each other better, which often requires physically going to learn about what other people's homes are, where they are, what they're like, what their lives are like, that's also the foundation for good public policy. So just to wrap up quickly, just because we didn't have enough going on, we also hired former LA Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa to be the state's new infrastructure czar. And I bring that up because it's good to talk about equity. It's better to do things. In fact, it's almost better not to talk about it if you're not going to do it, right? And for me, equity requires concrete action. Now, sometimes it's going to be literal concrete. Like, people need foundations for their homes. They need homes. They need, new transportation options. They need all these different things. If we are not both literally and figuratively taking concrete action in the state, we are not delivering equity for the people of the state. But we also need to do things differently. So much of the infrastructure spending that happened in the middle of the 20th century bulldozed low-income neighborhoods, communities of color. So we need to figure out how to do it right, but we also need to figure out how to do it, and we need to get it done. So I'm so glad to be in this room of doers, and it's wonderful to be back with you. Thank you, Herman, Oscar, and everybody else for having me here, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Micah. Now we're going to turn it over to Max with the Latino Community Foundation.
Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. And, I think I'm actually really excited for this part of the conversation. And even the theme, when we talked about restructuring, I think Herman at the opening was talking about how this is also about shifting the status quo, right? In the work that we're doing, we're reimagining, right? We're inventing. And, it really does speak to what it means to take on the status quo, right? If you don't challenge it, you only reinforce it. So I think that's the lens I look at it through. And then when we think about how you take on something with that much inertia, you think about community, and that's where you get your power. And so it's exciting to be in a room where that's happening in real time. At the Latino Community Foundation, we think of it of community and community power, love, culture, power as part of the themes of our work, because we are powerful, and we're on a mission to unleash the civic and economic power of Latinos in California. And rest assured, we are powerful. I think we know so much about the headwinds, we know so much about the equity gaps and the challenges, no doubt. At the same time, we have to learn more about our power and how we tap into that. And I think that's the approach, and I see that happening here in the space as we come together in community power. But we see it happening in these civic and economic spaces too, and that's where we're redoubling our efforts. So, I'll share, just as a top line, thinking about like the civic power of Latinos in California, right? We have 8 million eligible Latino voters in California. It's substantial. We're the largest voting bloc here in California, second largest in the state. And so, with those numbers, in California, we're going to be, really everywhere, but nationally, but in California, given those numbers, we're going to determine the balance of power in Congress this coming November, right? We're going to continue to shape the makeup, both the composition and the priorities of the state legislature, and decide so many local elections up and down the state. So I think I lift that up to say, absolutely, we are powerful. Do we need to focus on some of the equitable investments, leverage the partnerships, and make sure that systems that have their inertia to rely on the status quo are recognizing that power and making that clear. On the economic front, I've been dubbing this, as a shift, and we think about restructuring, what happens after recovery. I'm convinced that, Latinos have the power to lead not just a recovery, but an economic renaissance. We're coming off like the Black Plague, if you will, with the pandemic. And what comes next? It should be the renaissance. It should be more than just a recovery, as has been talked about, right? More than just getting back to normal, more than just getting back to what was. Because in many regards, we know that what was very unjust, right? We think about, how hard Latinos work for an economy, and is it working as hard for us, in that lens. One of the figures that recently came out was around the growth of Latinos in the U.S., not just in population, but in terms of economic impact, right? So we're already powering the nation economically and the state. We're now the 5th largest economy in the world. So if Latinos in the U.S. were their own country, we'd be the 5th largest economy in the world. I mean, that's astounding, right? And it's also emblematic of like the power of Latinos to create, right? We're creating families, we're creating communities, we're creating economic activity, and in that process, creating businesses, creating jobs in that work. In fact, on the entrepreneurial front, which is an area near and dear to our hearts, where we see our community have so much ganas, as they say, so much drive to start businesses. We're leading in entrepreneurship on so many fronts. I'll specifically call out and lift up our Latinapreneurs who are, at starting businesses at 6 times the national average, right? So they're the tip of the spear. They're leading the charge. And I think in doing so, also addressing challenges like the Latino wage gap, agency, and other things that may limit them if they can become their own entrepreneurs, be their own bosses, and be employers in our communities. So, I mean, those are some of the spaces where we're seeing economic power sort of materialize. And that's also why Latino Community Foundation has partnered with so many organizations across the state to lean into these strengths, right? To focus on grassroots Latino-led organizations who are in community, who know the community best, who are doing the work already, but who know that on the civic front, they need to be engaging on the $16 billion from the American Rescue Plan that's coming to cities and counties up and down the state. And how is that being leveraged to respond to community needs, right? Whether it's a community center or addressing some of the challenges and fallout from wildfires, like how are communities adapting to what's now an influx of dollars, and is that actually going to where it needs to be going, right? So we were just, we've had the privilege of working with so many organizations that have been advocating up and down the state, whether it's like in Calexico, getting the city to commit to keeping its funding plan in place so that it would fund community efforts, or in Merced, where 99 Roots, one of our partners, fought for and won $1.25 million for youth jobs as part of their plan as they envision a better and more just and equitable recovery. Just a sampling, but those are some of the ways that civic engagement sort of intersects then even with this economic justice lens and economic power work that needs to take place. On the entrepreneurship front, we recently held a Poder Latino event celebrating entrepreneurship in our community. And as part of that, we announced how we were supporting 17 organizations and partnering with them because they were on the front line and are on the front lines of working with entrepreneurs across the state and working with them in spaces where they're not always have traditionally gotten the level of capital access, the level of technical assistance and support. And it's because the leadership wasn't always there, meaning there wasn't always an organization that was focused on the Latino community. There wasn't always a Latino-led organization with Latino staffers, right, and employees who could work with folks directly. And that's, I think, one of the crux of sort of what we're trying to get at is ensure that Latinos are on both sides of the table, right? It may be that in the entrepreneurship or economic example, on that side of the table, starting their business, seeking the loan to really grow and scale their enterprise, and at the same time be on the other side where they're developing the support, lending the actual funding, and then on our front and with partners through our Latino giving circles, funding and finding ways to leverage philanthropy to also be there to back them up so that it is Latinos playing a role in all those spaces. And I think it kind of goes back to the point we touched on at the beginning. It's like, how do we restructure in a way that is actually more equitable and just, right? And that doesn't happen on its own. It doesn't happen by just having it be a one-way street. I think folks, as we know, need to have that opportunity to build their own tables and then invite and grow those tables, right? And so that's what's made me excited about this work and certainly about this timing, because we're coming, we're still in the pandemic per se in terms of like that being a concern. But we're looking forward, and we have to look forward towards restructuring in a way that actually works for us. In fact, that works as hard for us as we do for it. So thank you, and I'm just excited for the conversation and see what more we can partner on.
Great, thank you, Max. Now I'm going to invite Melissa Jones, who's head of Bar High and who's done a tremendous amount of work over the last couple of years, particularly in response to the pandemic. And her organization actually advanced some policy recommendations for how we should be using ARPA dollars that was an inspiration for many counties in the way in which they allocated those dollars. So, Melissa, welcome.
Fantastic. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So it is a pleasure to be following these two gentlemen here today. I have some slides, I think, just a handful. I have a visual up on the screen. I'm from BARHI. We're the coalition of the Bay Area's governmental public health departments. We focus on those issues that impact health, that hit outside the doctor's office. And we are, like many of you, a coalition of practitioners. Just back one slide to the, yeah. And like you, a coalition of practitioners. And I thought I'd talk a bit today about the pathway that we see that will move us from a recovery to transformation and really move us there in that kind of step-to-step, every day, walking into the office, walking into our businesses, and making the choices that transform us to a new future. And so I'm going to share 4 ideas with you. Some ideas about a process for equitable recovery, some ideas about building long-term resilience, some ideas about the government infrastructure that can be your partner in advancing racial equity, and some ideas about how we support movements across BIPOC communities. Next slide, please. This is an incredible moment of opportunity, and both of the gentlemen spoke to it, but there are a lot of resources flowing. It's actually a once-in-a-generation scale level of investment coming from the feds into California, and really poses a huge opportunity for us depending on how it all lands. And so there are the American Recovery Act dollars, which people are so familiar with now. Those were the dollars that went direct to many jurisdictions, and jurisdictions that are awarded in very flexible ways in which most jurisdictions are still awarding their second year of money for. There's also resources through the infrastructure package that many people have heard about, and it's going to come in a different way, which provides communities a different way to think about how to get to it. It's going to come in through a series of RFP, requests for proposals and NOFAs, and needing to put together proposals to win those dollars. And that's an opportunity for communities and government to be planning together around that. And there's also new money that'll be coming in through SURF, which is an economic development and planning process that'll happen region-wide here in the Bay Area with subdivisions focused on the different communities across our Bay Area. And then there's, of course, the inflation package that's coming forward soon. That's not on the slide. Next slide. And BARHI has taken some steps early on before ARPA came in, and then as different packages have come forward to train government employees and community members in the kinds of resources available and what they can be used for. And so for those of you who are doing advocacy in that space, we have a guidebook that is a general guidebook overall for the region, and then very specific plans that we've been helping communities develop as they need, that really take a look at 4 ways that investment can go from sort of spreading the peanut butter to being something that's really impactful and starting to build to our next phase of work. Next slide. We also spent some time with resilience communities and advocates across the region to talk about what would create the long-term capacity that is needed to do community planning and get us to a more equitable system. And so many of you probably know the pandemic showed us just how quickly we needed community partners all across the region working to advance getting information out, making sure people had access to food who were in tough spots, making sure that housing stayed stable for people who had lost income. That strategy, that work, really relied on a set of relationships, mutual aid networks, and community organizations. And they tended to work together and integrated together. Across our region, we have really uneven amounts of that kind of infrastructure to do work. And so here is really an idea about a strategy that would start to have that standing infrastructure already ready. It's an idea around providing resources to community groups in an ongoing way to support the kinds of resilience planning that deals with the kinds of climate impacts we all deal with now in a very regular way, the flooding, the wildfires, all of those pressures. And it's the guide is available for you. It's being used across the region, and it's been part of a lot of the planning processes that have happened around COVID-19 and the resilience that follows. Next slide, please. And I just have a quote here from one of our partners in the South Bay that I think has been poignant for the government officials that we've trained on this topic. And it really focuses on how we think about prioritizing resources for community. And so I won't read it, but I am going to go to the next slide. So I hope, I see folks looking at it, so I'm going to give you 1 minute, and then we're going to go to the next one. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then last, second to last, I want to talk about a model that has been really thrilling for us to see evolve across the Bay Area. Early on in the pandemic, as emergency operations centers stood up across the region, we really saw a need to have a staff person with authority over budget, authority over staffing, to be charged with thinking explicitly about equity in response. Equity in how information got out, equity in thinking about vaccines as they came online, a whole range of equity kinds of interventions, including figuring out where there were disproportionate loss and death rates, and identifying what could be done to change that across the course of the pandemic. That model we put out is called equity officers. We moved into having equity officers in nearly every emergency response in the Bay Area. It's a model that's been picked up statewide by the California Department of Public Health to have equity officers moving forward. And so what started as an emergency response opportunity is now a long-term position dedicated to equitable recovery and can be, I think, a real partner in the long-term transformation that we need next. You have an incredible set of equity strategies rolling out, I think, in your county. You have Alegria de la Cruz, who many of you know, who is the equity officer in your county. You also have a structure that we're really encouraging across the Bay Area, which is also to have an equity officer inside your health department. And so some of you know Denya. She's also doing that incredible work after her work with Alegria. And that starts to set up a whole model. We actually have a whole group of equity officers from all across the Bay Area who meet with us every month, including the two of them, to start the strategies that can be the long-term transformation we need, the step-by-step pieces that get us to a new place. And you'll see the work that she did on ARPA profiled up on the slide. Next slide, please. And lastly, there is this incredible moment for us to think together about the ranges of ways that we work as communities. And I think of California. We've heard all the data around the housing crisis. We know the data around the health concerns. So we have this shared umbrella of need as communities of color. We really do. And we have these unique pain points, right? And so it's really interesting, and I think a really good time for us to think about how we engage on those two issues together. How we set the umbrella of what we all want and support each other's initiatives and engage on unique pain points. And so I want to talk about two. One, the Pacific Islander community of the Bay Area. Folks don't often know this, but the Pacific Islander community of the Bay Area, in the way they are captured in data, are also often lumped in with a broader category of Asian that hides their particular needs. They have been working as a Pacific Islander task force across the full region to get their data disaggregated, to just get to the point where they aren't invisible in data. That has been a lift and an uphill battle that we've worked with them on, and we've seen and been able to do that for COVID and then use it for data since then. But that's the kind of campaign that I think across communities we can support for people to have the data they need to move forward in next steps. And then they have a series of maternal health and other kinds of healthcare programs that have been supported and rolled out based on that work. That's the kind of thing I think that we can do together. The other community I want to talk about for a minute is the African American community of the Bay Area. Here we have seen we've seen displacement everywhere across the Bay. Just unbelievable in terms of its numbers. And for the African American community, so incredibly deep. 66% of East Palo Alto's Black community gone, between 40 and 50% in Oakland, Berkeley, San Francisco. Big numbers, moving for a two-part track move, in part for first-time home ownership in a region that has just become too expensive to achieve it, in part for affordable rentals, right? this is a moment where we can be thinking about a solution for the African American community that includes housing solutions for everyone and the specific needs of the African American community. Last year, we ran a campaign in conjunction with Black-led organizations across the region for a fund that would specifically address that scale of erasure of Black communities in the Bay Area. So it made it to be a top 5 Bay Area caucus legislative priority, a top Black caucus legislative priority across the state of California. It'll continue to run this year. We invite people in to that campaign as well. So I think right here, I'll stop. Next slide, please. And say that it is a pleasure to see all of you. We do a lot of training all across the Bay Area. We do a lot of engaged support on media, on data, and on other things. And so I really want to invite I have the pleasure of knowing Oscar and the pleasure of knowing many of you here in Sonoma, and want to invite new partners and new friends as we continue down the path of an equitable recovery and into something new. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Melissa. Wow, what a great panel, and you gave us some very good information. Micah, you talked about like we've got to stop talking about equity and just get to doing it. Max, you focused on creating the table, making the table bigger, and Melissa, you're doing a lot of work, but it's really about how do we get ideas and transform them into action and bring people to the conversation. One of the things that we see so often is this rush to make sure that we have DEI plans that in a way that we're checking the box. And I think there's a real concern in doing that. And as Micah, you pointed out, we might as well just not even do it because it really further erodes the trust that exists in community. And so I wanted to ask you, as you do your work across the state and within your region, how can we ensure that we stay true to that commitment of authentic and genuine equity and not fall into that trap of just checking the box and saying, we've done it, look at our beautiful plan. Because I think in the long term, that just perpetuates the cycle of inequality and actually harms the very people who we're trying to help.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, two things, measurement and leadership. I love the Latino scorecard. We have a tool that you helped us put together called the California Dream Index. We really need to anchor ourselves in the progress we are making or not making. Melissa was saying, like, it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity if we do it right. It turns out spending money doesn't automatically create prosperity, right? Like, you hear a lot about, like, oh, $500 million for this. I'm psyched. We did, like, a $500 million down payment assistance program for, historically disenfranchised communities in home ownership this year. But like, it's not exciting because it's $500 million. It will be exciting when there are more homeowners from more diverse populations in California actually in their houses. So anchoring ourselves really first and foremost and always and coming back to that measurement is really important. Also, I think equity officers are great. 100% I'm in. And if your CEO is not your chief equity officer, it makes equity officers' jobs very, very difficult. And there are far too many government agencies, corporations that have created these DEI officers, DEI plans, and so on. And like, real talk, a lot of them are there to reduce legal liability for the corporation around like equity issues, right? So we got to make sure that we're that this is really also coming from the top so that the, equity officers aren't having to fight with, either their public or private CEOs, but they're really partners in getting this done.
Great, thank you, Micah. And if you have questions for our panelists, raise your hand and we'll get your question so we can ask it. Max or Melissa.
I was going to say, we've really been pushing around the region for people to understand this role of equity officer as being authority over budget and authority over staffing to really deploy and do the kinds of planning and work and not be figurehead positions. I think that's really important. Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to second that.
Yeah. No, I echo the 2 points, especially around the funding and budget component, right? Because it's sort of like, what are we actually trying to measure when we're capturing the data, right? Some of that might be about like if it's from a contracting level, as an example, where the money's going, who's being contracted, who's being employed, who's being hired. those are all expenditures, right? We talk so much about like budgets being moral documents. Those are all expenditures. So if we're actually committing to it at that level, I think we should see those numbers actually change and move the needle, right? I think the other thing that comes to mind is like, how do we institutionalize things even in spaces that are sort of newer for us? What comes to mind as one example is we worked with a partner down in LA, Inclusive Action, for the city around street vendors and legislative advocacy around streamlining processes so they could have more economic opportunity. But the conversation started much earlier when we were actually supporting and working with them around the work they were doing to support entrepreneurship in general. They were a CDFI and becoming a CDFI, we're a CDFI, and getting into the lending space and supporting. And they were realizing, no matter how much we do on like this effort to help them with their business plan and to help them with the lending, there is still this bottleneck. There's still this pressure point. And I think was really impressive and heartening is that they took that pressure point and said, that's our pressure point. Like, we need to work on that, even though that's not what we've initially set out to do or what we're working on a day-to-day. That's actually what's causing this bottleneck for the very folks we're trying to help. So let's make it our business too, right? So I think thinking about how we work ourselves into spaces that maybe are alien to us in some regard, right? And that it may be discomforting because it's a new space, there's some risk involved, but certainly from like an end user standpoint, if we're actually trying to address the needs of community X, Y, and Z, what do those communities actually face that are like preventing them from materializing, like from developing a business, from thriving from a health standpoint, advancing educationally? I think these are all the things that we can be looking at to also institutionalize too.
Yeah, and so I'll add one that's from your remarks, and which is, I think, having people in the roles, in the advisor roles, in the staff roles, in the business owner roles, who feel and understand the pain of the circumstances, right? So there's all the work that we can do around the institutionalization of pieces, and then there's the heart work of feeling and understanding and feeling it so much that you just won't be quiet when you see it's not real. Right? That you will continue to push and continue to fight because that'll be a continued part of this process, I think.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. Do we have any questions? Yes. Okay.
I thank you for the way you were responding to the questions about DEI. I imagine we were going to have equity, diversity, those sorts of words in the presentation. And something that kind of weighs heavy on me is we find all these results, we get all these numbers, and then what? Right? And so I guess my question will be shaped around the role of representation of challenging organizations and boards and anyone to put people in place that have the lens, that have the experience, that have the lived experience to be able to add value instead of saying, hey, this is what your reality is. Let me tell you how we're going to help you. How about we tell you? And I think challenging organizations to say, hey, we're going to put you in place so you can help us. And I like the quote where it says, don't hire the consultants, just have us right here in the room. So that's
Yeah, I love that quote. I mean, the thing is, like, with apologies to actual community theater is good. We shouldn't be doing any community theater in this kind of work, right? And too much community engagement is community theater, where the people aren't paid, right? There's like $1 million consultant, right, who brings in a bunch of hardworking folks that don't get paid, don't get childcare, don't get all these different things. So, when you're doing genuine community engagement, make sure that you are respecting these folks, which also means like respecting, like telling them what this conversation is about and what is possible and like what we're actually talking about at this meeting, right? Like, I feel like, like people do these kind of box checking exercises or, you really need to respect people's time, their energy, and you need to respect it with money. You need to respect it with support if you're going to be doing that kind of engagement.
Yeah. I do think also on the point around representation that you raise, we think about like what we're taking on. We talked a little bit about like the status quo and sort of the inertia that comes with that. I think the representation is also about that lived experience folks have coming in to address those issues and knowing that they haven't internalized the status quo and are only going to perpetuate it. So I think there's sometimes this nuance where we might face, whether folks that are coming into the space are there to like serve as agents of change and the community that needs it the most, as we've talked about, or whether it is checking a box, because for all intents and purposes it only checks a box if like the surname matches but the work stays the same. That's still checking a box, right? And it's not actually doing the work. So I just want to call that out too.
Other questions? You have note cards on your table. I wanted to expand a little bit about that, because here I'm going to brag a little bit about Sonoma County and our ARPA work, because with the board support, we created an ARPA equity work group of people with lived experience who actually informed the process, and they gave shape to where we should be investing based on the data that we have. And so I think our challenge, right, is moving forward, how do we make those structures permanent? Because they can't be temporary. They can't be just to fill a very short-term need. But if we really want to have ongoing and continuous engagement, we have to build that civic infrastructure for that to occur. And as, I don't know who said it, but we actually have to, there's a value to the time that is given. And so we have to recognize and actually pay people for their wisdom, for their expertise of the work they're doing in their community. So I'm hoping that, through a lot of the work that you're doing, that we continue to advocate for the necessary infrastructure to move beyond the ad hoc convenings, to move beyond the soliciting feedback only to never go back and close the loop with those communities, but that we make that real and a permanent infrastructure of what we do across all of our institutions. So are there things that you would advise us, our community, either to do more of or to look to figure out how to make that real across our communities and our regions?
Yeah, I mean, this is an area where we would love to partner with you, because we think one of the things that really matters is that the stories of what works gets told and then gets turned into standards. And so we are working on that now with people across the region, and we're barhigh.org if people want to write to us and share their ideas, and we're happy to come out and meet with folks and get down in writing the things that have been working for you and really show the change that they create to try to create the momentum and then to do the standards work that makes them more permanent. And so we do that standards work with a lot of different partners. So for example, there are accreditation programs for public health departments. There are standards being set, thinking around equity officers. There's standards being set about what creates the conditions for true equity in a government institution or in DEI work. And so if we can get to some of that standards work being not box checking, being very real, being based on a set of community conversations that evaluate its impact, I think those are ways that that we could be in partnership and support.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, I think in terms of civic infrastructure, there's this boon of an opportunity in the space of like community power, right? Like power building gets you so far on these things because that's the longevity, right? That's one way to institutionalize things. There's certainly the sort of legislative play. There's ways to change city charters. There's ways to do so much work, in these different spaces at the institutions within government. But then there's a civic, social infrastructure that is needed and needs to be there indefinitely. It needs to grow and be strong enough to be that watchdog, to be that voice, and frankly to be there. Over time, officials term out. Over time, there's turnover, there's change. But I think there being institutions and communities that are anchor institutions that are working closely with community and actually have that support and capacity to grow and to not be displaced, to have a home, right, as an institution and be there as a partner for community is really key. I think you'll see that whether it's nonprofits, whether it's like media and communications and other work that shapes narrative. Like if you don't have all those components or you don't have the requisite investment there, it does make it harder to make these things sustainable if there's a change in leadership in a few years or we forget that we're a few years past the pandemic as maybe wildfires hopefully improve and get to a point where folks get get amnesia around the needs and why we were working so hard at one point, right? And so I think the institutions are the ones that help remind community, help continue that work.
Yeah, I mean, this period of the pandemic, there's obviously been a tremendous amount of pain, but it's also been Oprah time you get a $30 million program, and you get a $30 million program, right? Everybody's got a $30 million program underneath their seats. Hopefully those will be good. But we can't have them be one-time programs that came from a period of our having a lot of money. It is so much more important how we spend our money when we don't have very much of it, right? So, like, that's what we're really going to be watching and advocating for over the course of the next couple of years, because, like, I wish we just had a few hard years. Can't we get a break for a little while? Maybe not. This isn't an economic talk, so I won't spend too long, upsetting you with statistics. Maybe not. Maybe we're heading into a recession, right? Maybe we're heading into a much more constrained budgetary environment at the state level. And if we are, that's when this work becomes even more important, because we're talking about how do we use more limited resources, and therefore how do we make sure that we are using those resources in the way that is the most impactful. I go around and I do a lot of talking in Sacramento, and I get a lot of hypotheses, right? So everybody will tell me, this program is going to do something amazing, right? Nobody proposes a program that isn't going to do something amazing. But without being a jerk, because with elected you have to be very nice. I'd find the nicest way to say, what's your evidence for that, right? What is the reason that I should believe that this program is going to have the impact that you think that it is? So we need to keep grounding ourselves in evidence, and we need to be making those evidence-based investments, especially if we're heading into a period of time that might be a little challenging.
Great, thank you so much. And we have run out of time. I do just want to say that Melissa mentioned the SURF process, the Community Economic Resiliency Fund, and both all three of you are working on that process. So there will be an opportunity for our community to give voice to that process and what we should be doing and prioritizing our investment. And, Micah mentioned the next month we're going to be in Bakersfield. There's still time. We invite you to join us. We can caravan down and just be part of an amazing program very similar to what we held in 2018. And I did have a question or a comment from one of the audience members. We don't have time, but we want to be able to respond to it as future panels. And she says, it's in Spanish, ¿Cómo se puede hacer el cambio cuando los propios líderes no lo hacen primero? She says, how can we expect change if our own leaders are not leading in change first? So it's more of a statement that we got to lead by example. And ¿Cómo se habla de reestructuración cuando el modelo de los líderes son otros? How can we talk about restructuring when the existing model is from leaders who don't represent or who are not like us? So I think it's a message back to, I think, what Willie, what you were saying is that we have to make sure that our leadership, across all leadership, is representative or mirrors the community in which we serve. So that should be a call for all of us to heed and to make sure that we are making every opportunity to cast a wide net of inclusion. So thank you to our panel. And now, so thank you. We're going to take just a short break from the speakers. And now I want to invite Angélica Negrón with the Santa Rosa Symphony Spotlight. And she's a composer with the Santa Rosa Symphony. And she'll be, her piece will be Me He Perdido. Is Angélica here? Oh, there you are. Come on up. Welcome.
I was looking for the little stool for short people. Buenos dias. Hi, everyone. My name is Angélica Negrón. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much to Los Cien for having me and to Hernan G. It's a pleasure to be amongst you. I spent a little time listening, and a lot of things also resonate with classical music. I'll share more about that in a second. But my name is Angélica. I'm a Puerto Rican composer performer and educator. I was born in the island, and I right now live in Brooklyn. And I'm here with the Santa Rosa Symphony. We have a really great concert over this weekend, and I'll tell you more about it. I'm doing a residency with them as part of the first Symphony project. Has anyone been to the Symphony before? Wow, that's amazing. Great. That's really exciting. So I grew up in Puerto Rico. I grew up as a violinist. I never played anything by someone that was alive, so I didn't know I could be a composer. Just didn't see it. So I was like, I'm just gonna keep playing violin and be super distracted by the chord and the horns and the percussion and be fascinated by it, but I had no idea what that meant for me. I was really lost. And I was doing violin, but then I started being very curious about other instruments. I started teaching myself the accordion, learning cello, learning harp. And I thought I was the most unfocused violin student ever until I realized that what I wanted to do was to write for all the instruments. And that really changed my life. And I've been writing music ever since. It's been 22 years of me writing music. And I started it pretty late, actually, for composers, like when I was 20. You can do the math. And I'm really passionate also about education because I feel like in music, and I'm sure some of you have this experience too, when you learn about music, it's through technique, through a right or wrong way of doing things, right? This is how you hold the violin, this is how you hold the bow, and no, it's not like that. And we never get to play with sounds or explore. When we are doing that in preschool with visual arts, it's very common, right? We all play with crayons, with colors and watercolors, and there's no right or wrong. It's very exploratory, but we never get to do that with sound. And I think even if you're not going to be a composer or a musician, but if it's such a really beautiful skill set to have that kind of sense of curiosity and how to follow that. And I've been working for about 12 years with a program in New York, with the New York Philharmonic called Very Young Composers that mentors young students. My students are 10, 11, 12-year-olds, and they write pieces sometimes for the whole New York Philharmonic, which is pretty amazing. And I'm always and constantly inspired by the sounds that they make up in their head. And a lot of it's because they don't have all this baggage of like what classical music is supposed to sound like, which is what I struggle with every day when I'm about to write a piece, because I went to the conservatory and I'm definitely not a dead white man. So it's sometimes hard to be constantly in the spaces that they are historically occupying. So I've been very surprised by having a career as an orchestral composer. The piece that will be premiered with the Santa Rosa Symphony next year will be my 15th orchestral piece. I never in my life, thank you. I never ever in my life thought that would be possible. My first piece was with the Puerto Rico Symphony. They did a really amazing workshop for young composers, because it's really hard as a composer to have an orchestral piece performed. It's a lot of people, which means a lot of money, and a lot of resources, and the arts are already in a really precarious state, especially in the island. But they did this initiative that was wonderful, and I got a recording out of that, and then from that, when I went to NYU for my master's, I won a competition for doing a residency with the NYU Symphony, and then from there I got another one, and then my first paid commission, and then I'm now on my 15th. But I say that because I still struggle when I'm writing a piece with finding my space, and because I'm mostly being programmed with Beethoven or Strauss. Those two keep coming up, and I'm like the little piece in the beginning, right? And the more I'm in those spaces, the more I think it's really important to kind of be unapologetic about who I am and not really carry the weight of tradition. Thank you. It can be sometimes really kind of heavy, but, and I've learned this actually by seeing my students interact with the orchestra, seeing those 10-year-olds in front of the New York Philharmonic, just like, yeah, it's like, no, not like that. Like, and I'm like, whoa, I wish I had that. So I've been trying my best to keep doing what is it that brought me here in the first place, which is being excited about music and exploring sounds. I love sounds from the environment, weird, unconventional sounds, and the piece that the Santa Rosa Symphony will be playing this weekend, it's called Me He Perdido, and it has some calderos and pots and pans from my kitchen that I sampled, and I bring them into the orchestra too. I'm really interested in putting those in conversation, not elevating pots and pans. They're already way up there for me. And I really don't like that word, elevating. I love putting those things in conversation. I love inviting my abuela and my mom into the concert hall too, and seeing what other things that can evoke in others when they listen. The piece is called Me He Perdido. It's a lot about the search for home, being in diaspora. I've been in New York now for 15 years. Most of my family and my friends are still in the island. Is anyone from Puerto Rico here? No hay boricuas. Una. Por allá. Yeah. So we're going to another difficult time, so please keep us close to your heart. We are resilient, but we also deserve better. So keep us in your hearts. Thank you. And I have just one. I'm trying to keep good track of time. Okay. I have 2 more minutes to talk to you. I'll before telling you more about the concert, I'll just really briefly say that I'm here as part of the First Symphony Project, which is a really exciting initiative from the Santa Rosa Symphony and in partnership with the Eugene Symphony. And I was asked to write my first symphony. And I've written a lot of orchestral music before. And symphony is kind of like it's I don't know, in classical music there are things that are unnecessarily complicated, but symphony is used to refer to the orchestra itself, right? So we have the Santa Rosa Symphony, but it's also a pretty specific musical form that was developed many years ago. So when I was commissioned to write my first symphony, I immediately just was like, what does that mean to me? Someone living in 2022, 4'11", Puerto Rican woman with purple hair. I don't know what that means. I'm still figuring it out. I'm almost done with the piece. I'm super excited about it. Basically, I can tell you the long story short is that it meant that it could be anything I wanted it to be because I'm in charge. So I hope that you come back for that in February next year. It'll be very exciting. And for this weekend, I want to personally invite you all to hear my work that I mentioned before, Me He Perdido. It's inspired by a poem by the Argentinian poet Oliverio Girondo, and a line that says, No estaba con mi sombra, me he perdido. I wasn't with my shadow, I've gotten lost. I adore his poetry. So come hear that this Saturday, Sunday, and Monday at the Green Music Center here, performed by your very own Santa Rosa Symphony, conducted by the amazing Francesco Lechechong. If you need more arm twisting, we are giving Los Cien members a coupon code for a special discount when you buy your tickets on the Santa Rosa Symphony website. So the code is LC15. Again, the code is LC for Los Cien 15, and that's 15% off altogether with no spaces. So if you buy your tickets by phone or in person, just mention Los Cien to the box office staff. And we're also leaving some flyers here today. I hope to see you there this weekend. And I'll be back also in about 5 months. I have to finish this piece with my first full symphony, Deep Breath, in March. And I hope to see you all again. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, folks, we got to show our love for Angélica, and let's get out to the symphony and see her show. So it's time for our next panel discussion. This is on ARPA small business, and is really discussing, building beyond barriers. And you're going to hear how different organizations have come together through the magic of ARPA. So I'd like to invite Dr. Marlene Orozco. She's the CEO and founder of Stratified Insight Research Consulting, and was with Stanford University, and is actually partnered with Los Cien as our resident economist. So Dr. Orozco, please join us.
a step stool, all right. Buenos dias, good morning, everybody. Oh, come on. Buenos dias and good morning, everybody. There you go. Maybe we should, everybody stand, and we're just gonna do a quick stretch. Get that energy flowing. Everybody stand on up. Do a quick stretch. High five your neighbors if you're so inclined. Let's get that energy going. Perfect. Okay, great. All right, we can go ahead and take a seat. It is my pleasure to be here today. And the panel we're about to hear, I have an excellent panel lined up for you all, and it's all about building beyond barriers. Now, we heard this morning about it's been Oprah time, right? The American Rescue Plan Act disseminated $1.9 trillion in a stimulus bill. In Sonoma County, $34 million was received and allocated to communities. And so you're gonna hear from ARPA recipients, again, American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, in just a bit, how they're transforming these dollars, this fusion of dollars, into action. Now, before we hear from this panel, as a researcher by training, I'm loving all the data that's been shared thus far, and I want to set the stage and contextualize for you all the state of entrepreneurship for the BIPOC community. Much of my research lies within the Latino community, and we've heard again this morning that Latinos are a fast-growing population. We became the largest ethnic group in California way back in 2014. The rest of the country is catching up. And so we are, as you know, a majority minority state. Of the 39 million people living here, 39% of those, or 15 million, over 15 million, are Latino. And so this is a powerful story of population growth. And with growth, hopefully their growth in numbers, there's also power. We need to see more of that. And an untold story is that of entrepreneurship. Latinos are actually starting businesses at a much faster rate than their population growth. And the BIPOC members of the community are also starting businesses at a faster rate than their white counterparts. And if we think about the most recent economic recession in 2008, there actually would have been fewer businesses in 2012 compared to 2007 if it were not for Latinos starting businesses. Now, yeah, that deserves a round of applause. And I want to note that this is an important bright spot because entrepreneurship is a building block of wealth in this country. A traditional pathway is home ownership. And we saw somebody struggle this morning talk about trying to buy a home. It's a challenge. Education is another building block of wealth. Entrepreneurship is another building block. And we oftentimes think about, if you were to close your eyes and think about an entrepreneur, a Latino or a BIPOC business owner might not come to mind. In fact, if you Google the word entrepreneur, you'll get Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates. My dream, my goal is that for one day when you Google entrepreneur, you see a member of the Latino community, you see somebody who is sitting in this room right now pop up in that Google search. Oftentimes, these businesses are described as necessity businesses, and they're deemed for failure or staying small. And in fact, throughout the pandemic, 2.9 million micro businesses, micro online businesses started. And so there's a sense that these might not last. And the reality is that necessity businesses can and do become opportunity businesses. We saw this throughout the pandemic within the Latino community. Entrepreneurs who were able to access pandemic relief aid through the over $800 million deployed by the Paycheck Protection Program, which then became forgivable grants, they were able to stay afloat, become innovative, generate new business products and services, and of course, transform their businesses to digital spaces. There's the story of Lorena, who had an empanada shop, and before the pandemic, her fastest growing revenue stream was conducting empanada making classes in her multiple shops. And she thought for a second that that revenue stream was going to close. But in fact, she transferred empanada making classes to Zoom, as many of us did, right? And that continued to be a revenue stream for her. And it also built community during a time of quite many challenges. So that's the story of our growth not just in population, but also in entrepreneurship. Now, of course, we're also here to talk about the tough times and the barriers. Certainly, we're experiencing, even for big businesses, right? We're in a bear market right now. And for small businesses, there's been challenges of not just the pandemic, but supply chain issues, inflation, ongoing climate change. My heart goes out to those in Puerto Rico and in Florida. Of course, we experience that here with ongoing wildfires, earthquakes, right? This is the terrain that small businesses must navigate. And so it's critical that there is this infrastructure built and ready to go to deploy not just relief aid, but sustained and institutionalized support and programming, which we'll hear in just a bit. And for members of the BIPOC business community, oftentimes these existential crises and times of challenge are compounded by legacies of discrimination. We oftentimes learn in history class about mortgage lending and redlining, how homes weren't sold to African Americans or Latinos, right? They were sectioned off, they were redlined. Similar practices happen in business lending. In fact, if a national bank, which is a traditional source of lending, were to look at two business applicants on paper, one Latino and one white, and they share the same revenue, same profitability, they're in the same industry, if you are Latino, your chances of getting approved for that national bank loan are 60% lower. That's holding all else equal. That's worse than flipping a coin. And so we, as architects of our own solutions, are starting to build businesses in the finance industry. You'll hear from Juan Hernandez in just a bit, who's doing just this. Again, we're also entrepreneurs in the media industry. You'll hear from Hector in just a bit. So I challenge us all to change our misconceptions, change our perceptions about who an entrepreneur is, because again, it is a pathway for wealth generation in this country. So the last thing I want to talk about is the role of relief aid. So the pandemic created a natural experiment, if you will, where there was this massive deployment of dollars to through stimulus packages, through the Paycheck Protection Program, through ARPA, Oprah time as it was called earlier. And we are here to show action. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about again is how the organizations are deploying these ARPA funds. So with that in mind, I want to go ahead and welcome my three panelists to the stage. We have Juan Hernandez, who is the founder and CEO, co-founder and CEO of Crecel Capital Fund. And I'll have them introduce themselves in just a moment. We have Nicole Lim joining us. She's from the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center. And we have Hector Velasquez, who's the CEO of Latinx Foundation's Small Business Education, President and CEO of Nexo Media. Welcome. Now, one more note about the role that capital and this infusion of money really plays in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. Research actually found that when people receive their stimulus checks, right, as individuals, as consumers, that led to an increased spike in business registrations, right? So there's a world of opportunity that happens when you have capital available. So what I'd like to do now is I'd love to start with my panel here and have a brief round of intros. They're going to share a little bit about themselves and their organization's story. And then we're going to get into the meat of this ARPA funding and what they did to obtain it and how they're going to leverage it. So we'll start here with Hector. Go ahead, Hector.
Yay, the butterflies. Hello, everyone. You know, the Red Latinx, the hub, red in Spanish means network, started around the pandemic, mainly because we saw opportunity about many small businesses not having the right access or the same access as everybody else. And they would come into the hub, and 2 out of 10 had the proper documentation or the proper structure, business structure, in order to access funds. So it was heartbreaking to turn away 8 of those folks because they had no accounting, no paperwork, everything was written in a book. So heartbreaking to see some of these close. And when we saw, you know, I'm in marketing as stated, and when we saw the opportunities, I actually got here in Sonoma County in 2003, and I said, all we have to do is just communicate, and it's done. It's a done deal, and here we are still dealing with the same thing. So I want you to remember these names. It's a brief story that I share. Chente, Vicente, and Vince. Just remember these, Chente, Vicente, and Vince. If you're Latino and I'm from Guadalajara, if you are told a slang name down there, that means you're welcome, you're part of the family. If they're calling you by your name next time you go over there, I should question that. So Chente, right, Chente, he's early 20s, and he hears about the U.S., wants to immigrate, comes and wants to just live the American dream. And he lands here in the U.S., and he's here for you know, a brief time. He wants to go back home. He doesn't care where he sleeps. He doesn't care if it's in a closet, in his car. It doesn't matter. All that Chente wants to do is send money back home. That's all he wants to do. He doesn't plan to stay here. He just wants to build a home and go back home, right? 10 years go by, right? And now he's given the opportunity to become a resident. Chente now becomes Vicente. Now Vicente is divided. He's brokenhearted. He loves the opportunity the U.S. gave him, but he's looking back home and he's just divided, absolutely divided. He has kids now, right? And he looks at the Chentes of the world and he says, boy, I was there once, you know, and Chente, don't work too hard. Just slow down there for a little bit. 20 years go by, and now Vicente becomes Vince. And I know there's some Vinces here, so no offense to you. It's just me. So now Vince, he's more acculturated. He understands what America mainstream looks like, and his circle of friends, right, are completely different. They're the majority are non-Latino, or they're more diverse, right? But when you look at the Vicentes of the world, you see more of the circle that the folks, and this can apply to any type of nationality. And I'm using these names because I'm from Mexico, but apply these to anybody. The funny thing is that when Vince wants to hire some work, guess who he goes to? He goes to the Chentes, right? Cheap labor, get this guy over here, right? Now, the sad thing is that when Vicente and Chente go in to access funding or access any type of opportunity, they all get looked at the same. And that's a sad part, right? That's the area of opportunity that I think that, thank you to Los Cien to put this together and allow me to share this little story. We shed some light into that, right? Now, Vince will eventually become mainstream America, and this is the thing. Mainstream America, when they want to actually reach the Latino market, who do they go to? They go to the Vinces of the world, right? And why do they go to the Vinces of the world? Because they're more acculturated, they connect. But how can we reach the Vicentes and the Chentes? And this is why we created the Latinx Hub, because we want to make sure that we serve every single individual that has this opportunity to start a business, right? To have access to capital, to have access to all the wonderful things that America has to offer. And this is how we built the hub. And anyway, thank you for the opportunity. And pass it on.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nikki Lim. I'm the director of the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center. I'm Pomo and Miwok. Mendocino Lake in Sonoma County is my family's ancestral territory. We've been here since time immemorial, which means ever since anyone could remember. The museum's also been here a long time. We've been here since, we've been in San Francisco since 1996. We moved to Santa Rosa in 2001. And I had fully planned to follow my father's insistent request, twisting my arm, that I go to law school. didn't necessarily want to go to law school, but he said I didn't have anything else to do. So I went to law school. And I had fully planned to go into our family's nonprofit legal business. But when I was in law school, I was reading cases, constitutional law, and looking at how cases on religious freedom were decided. And I really learned that, you know, there's a lot of racial and historical bias, and that judges bring that to the table. And so when I started working at the museum, I really felt that I could do a lot more to change the minds of the classroom before they got to the courtroom. And so I've dedicated my career towards the work of the museum, which is educating the public about California Indian history and culture from a Native perspective. And it's really leading with Native voices. We are focused on, you know, our objects are beautiful, our baskets are beautiful. They're symbols of our cultural heritage, but it's our people that breathe life into them and give them meaning and stories. And so our museum is really focused on the living, focused on the younger generation, teaching them cultural knowledge, connecting them to their ancestral territory, letting them define, you know, who a Native American is in the future. And so a lot of our work is around oral history, food sovereignty, education reform, language revitalization. So we do a lot of different types of things, but we always welcome you. We're just up in Larkfield off of Airport Drive, and would love to have you visit. We're often told nobody knows we're there. Sometimes that's for a reason. It's so we can get all that work done. But look forward to sharing our programming with you today. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be back live with people, you know, looking them in the face. The whole Zoom thing, right? I totally lost my influence on people over Zoom. So happy to be back live with people. My name is Juan Hernandez. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Crecer Capital Fund. We are an investment lending organization here in Sonoma County. We believe that the greatest opportunity Sonoma County has for prosperity is investing in the Latino community and in Latino small businesses. Sonoma County, I mean, all these stats are being thrown out, but let me just give you the one that really is the one that drives us. Right now, Latinos are about 1 of every 3 people in Sonoma County. Yet, we have 1/8 of the wealth of Sonoma County. We are projected to be 2 of every 3 people by the year 2060. Now, the question is, are we still going to have 1/8 of the wealth when 2 of every 3 people are Latino? That's that nut that we're trying to crack. That's the challenge that's in front of us. We are a part of that solution. We know we're not the only solution, but entrepreneurship is a pathway for our mobility. And so that's who we are. That's what Crecer Capital Fund is. We were launched at the beginning of 2021. We're currently applying to become a CDFI, which stands for a Community Development Financial Institution. And what that is a certification from the U.S. Treasury Department as a trusted lender in the community. We will, in fact, today we will hit submit on our application. Everybody keep your fingers crossed. We're really excited because if we're able to get that certification, Crecer Capital will be an institution that will be in Sonoma County for the next 20, 30, 40 years. Thank you.
And that's really a big step, Juan. CDFIs were really critical throughout the course of the pandemic. Again, they built the relationships prior, the infrastructure prior to the pandemic to be able to deploy capital. So we'll light a candle for you, Juan, and we'll light a candle for Vicente and all of the other Chentes and Vinces. So now that you've met the panel, I want to welcome everybody to, if you have questions, to write them down. You have index cards on your table. We welcome questions in Spanish. We welcome questions in English or in any other language, and hopefully we'll have them translated. But now I want to get to the ARPA process. Now, last year, I was commissioned to make a data-driven case by the Economic Board of Development And this was through an equity lens. And shout out to Sheba, who really led this effort. And I made the case with the County Board of Supervisors about how to allocate those funds. And of course, my shtick is all about entrepreneurship, so I made the case for entrepreneurship. And I informed them that if Latinos in Sonoma County were funded on par to their white business counterparts, there would be an additional $1.3 billion in revenue available in Sonoma County. And so this presents an immense opportunity. And what I'd like to hear now from is the stories from the panelists. Tell us about your ARPA process. I know there was a lot of coalition building, a lot of thought really put into how to lay the groundwork for sustained and institutionalized structures. So we'll start with Juan.
So the ARPA process, before I start with the ARPA process, just know that my work and collaborations in Sonoma County go back to 2012, right when I was the executive director of La Luz. There was a big push in the community around the Portrait of Sonoma back then, 2012, 13, I think 14. That first collaboration was my introduction into understanding how Sonoma County works, who are the players. And so my understanding of who the people are in the community go back since 2012. Obviously, a lot of things have changed. My work with La Luz during the 2017 fires also gave me some insight of how to access funds that are coming down on emergency, how to collaborate with others, or where the funding's at. The fires of 2019 also offered another opportunity to deepen relationships with people I already had in the community as executive director of La Luz. So I just want to kind of pretext that with a lot of the relationships that were formed were already deepened, and I think that was a big thing as we went into this ARPA funding. When Crecer launched, we knew that we wanted to focus on the lending product, which is a microloan program between $1,000 and $50,000, and we knew that we needed support around technical assistance. I met with Sheba, and I said, look, is there any way we could partner up on the ARPA funds? And she was the first person that said yes. When the guidelines come out, we're going to partner. EDB is going to be with Crecer because she understood the value of having a CDFI in the community. Soon after Sheba left, I met with Ethan. I called Ethan. I said, hey, is EDB still on board? Do you guys still want to partner with us with this ARPA funding? And Ethan said, yes, let's meet. And so the conversation started with Ethan Brown, I think at the Economic Development Board. I think the next day or that same day I had a meeting with Hector. I understood he was starting the Latinx Hub, and so I knew that I needed that technical support. I met with Hector, and Hector's like, we should partner up. And I said, we should. Ethan, I'm partnering up with Ethan. And so him and Ethan already had a conversation that Ethan was going to come visit the Latinx Hub, I believe. Pretty soon, I think Peter Rumble reached out and said, hey, there's this art, maybe there's an opportunity. I know he wanted to work with the Chamber of Commerce's. And I say, hey, I just talked to Ethan, I just talked to Hector, let's meet. Right around that time, I think Ronit came through from Sonoma County Legal Aid. She said, hey, we have an opportunity, legal aid, and to support small businesses. I said, hey, we're gonna have a meeting next week, jump on that meeting. I think the next hour I had a meeting with Herman Hernandez, Papa Herman Hernandez, and he's like, hey, what's going on with this funding? And I'm saying, hey, we're putting a collaboration together. We already have these 4 or 5 people. And he said, okay, let's do this. And Hector had talked to the Hardship Fund, and the Hardship Fund was talking to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and we said we should just all get together and figure this out and unite and apply together as a collaboration for the ARPA funding. And we did. I think Peter was able to round up the Chamber of Commerce, Ethan Brown, Latinx Hub, SBDC, Peter came in. And the idea was to build a funnel of outreach to the community around small business and entrepreneurship that would then lead to educational opportunities with the Latinx Hub, EDB, SBDC, and legal aid. And then they would make a funnel towards capital for Latino community in Crecer Capital. And that's how that collaboration came together.
Yeah.
And I'll add that to Juan, and I think everything happened so quickly, but I think quickly because we were all prepared for this opportunity. I think that what we had seen, we had a great opportunity, and I think one of the best things is that we also included the Black Chamber of Commerce. I think that they're the Asian, so we really went out and about to make it very, very inclusive. And it was just exciting to begin how the county itself developed a committee. I was fortunate to be part of that committee and the whole infrastructure, and then to be awarded funding. We didn't expect it. We're so young, but the experience, our co-founders, Hugo Mata, which I think he's in the building, along with Mariana, and Gustavo Sanchez, just itself, we just had that synergy that we have this opportunity to create a pathway, like Juan was stating, into the workshops to make sure that these folks had the right documentation, that before we got them loan ready, that we got them prepped to access any of the resources that were out there. But the most exciting thing is just how so many organizations from a diverse background got together to bring and to collaborate to something like this. And there's been a lot of work the last several months to start working on this. We're also excited, but just the feeling overall and being in Sonoma County again since 2003 to see something like this has just been extraordinary. And Peter Rumble taking the lead. Thank you, Peter, for doing all that you do with that. I mean, it's just been short of amazing.
I do want to add another piece that I think that as we started collaborating and uniting through the community side, the table was set to receive us. And this is all the work that Alegría has been doing, all the work that Oscar Chavez has been doing on the county side, in terms of they were ready to receive this type of collaboration, where in the past it was a little bit more difficult for organizations like ours, especially startup organizations, to receive that level of funding. We usually, small organizations in Sonoma County, from my experience, usually lose out to other organizations that have a development director, development associate, development intern, a social media person, a helper, and 5 interns, right? Those are the ones that are able to write the grant, go speak in front of the supervisors, go meet one-on-one with the funders, and get those bigger grants. And I think this time the script was flipped, and we were able to get funding to people that would have never gotten funding or even looked at in the past.
So Indians and federal funds go way back. We've been dealing with federal funding for a long time. And because of that, we have, capacity to do federal funds, which a lot of newer Native organizations don't have that history. So I think it's very difficult. We've had everything from funding from the Centers for Disease Control to right now we have an economic development funding. So we've done a wide range, and we actually very consciously a few administrations ago decided to work towards more private foundation funding because we were really tired of having to ride the wave and the trends of funds and wanted more stability in our organization. But our ARPA project really dates back to 2017. Our museum is in Larkfield, and we weren't sure if it was still there for a few days. And when we did get access, many of the neighbors in the surrounding areas were in our parking lot, and we just started doing direct services because people needed help. And through the successive fires and the pandemic, we realized that our tribal community was not getting an equitable distribution of resources. And having been around a long time and being a trusted community organization, they were coming to us. And so we really started working on getting cash assistance. We started doing weekly food box distributions, working with 9 tribal farmers in the Bay Area. We started distributing assistance to elders. Our tribal youth started gathering teas and making traditional medicines that promoted respiratory health. And so it's, our ARPA project kind of is an umbrella for a lot of different issues in our community. It's about food sovereignty. And food sovereignty for us was really prioritized after the fires by our tribal community as a means of climate change mitigation. That if we're out regularly working and having a consistent relationship with our ancestral territory and stewarding it in the way that we apply traditional ecological knowledge, it prevents a lot of the disasters that we've been experiencing. You know, the ban on traditional burning and fire ecology for 100 years definitely contributed to the disasters that we've experienced. And so our project is around cultivating traditional food producers and creating a marketplace for them to be able to provide traditional foods, not only to our community, but to our local community. And that's really key, not only in terms of environmental stewardship, but also in the health of our Native people. We have so much dietary-related disease, chronic disease in our community, and it's directly related to the food that we eat. You know, many people love fry bread, and I love it once a year, but that's not Indian food. That's colonizer food that was made from the rations that were given to us by the government, and we did some good stuff with it. But we have to get back to our acorn, our manzanita, our salmon, all of those things that are nutritious and going to nurture us and that are part of our DNA. And so our ARPA project, while it serves the purpose of creating food vendors, it serves a bigger purpose on reestablishing our relationship to our ancestral territory, connecting, and working to improve the health of our tribal community. So.
And we're receiving lots of questions from the audience, so thank you. Keep those coming. For my next question, I want to start actually by sharing a personal story. So when I was at Stanford, first-generation college kid to go to college, parents are immigrants from Jalisco, Mexico, with a sixth grade education. Now I have a PhD, sharing that so you can see what's possible. But thank you. When I was at Stanford, I participated in a retreat with leaders from the community centers. At Stanford, we have ethnic community centers. I was one of the leaders of El Centro Chicano y Latino. We had the Black Community Services Center, the Asian American Activities Center, and the Native American Cultural Center. So we were all together on this weekend retreat. And one of the activities, each of the leaders, there was about 6 of us, were given plates. We each had 1 plate. Plus 1 more. And our goal was to leverage those plates and get across to the other line. Now, we couldn't touch the ground. We could only use those plates. And we were told that the team that got across would get Jamba Juice gift cards. So here comes in my competitive spirit and that of my peers. And you saw all kinds of things, acrobatics and cartwheels, trying to use these plates to get across. And we certainly didn't have enough. Didn't matter how much we stretched, there were people trying to go over each other's backs and leapfrog to get to the other side. This went on for about 30 minutes until, and I can't take credit for this, but there was somebody from the Native American Cultural Center who started looking around and went over to one of the other teams, and they had their plates in their hand, and the other team had their plates in their hand, all ripped and frustrated at this point. And we all started to look, and that's when it clicked. We came together, quite literally, and put our plates together to get across to the other side. And we walked seamlessly through. We built this path. You can think about the plates as a symbolism for resources. We built this path, and we all walked across. So this question is for the group about how we can build those bridges and systems and structures and work with each other in a respectful manner. We had one of the questions specifically directed to Nikki. Can you share your thoughts on how folks of the broader BIPOC communities can work respectfully with Native American and Indigenous people and organizations? How can we build those bridges, share resources, and institutionalize these structures?
Thank you. We get lots of requests, and it's important, I think, to realize that for Native people, we know that other groups don't know a lot about our history, and that's for a reason. I mean, the last stage of genocide is denial, and as we continue to not educate the public about the true history of the state, we perpetuate it. And it's sometimes a little bit you get a little bit of burnout when you're continually asked to partner, but you have to bring the partner up to speed and educate them. And so I think it's really important to learn about the other groups and learn how you can best support them. And sometimes that's, giving Native people the space to lead. We have about 20,000 tribal people among the 24 tribes in the Tri-County region. But that's very small. California has the largest number of Native Americans of any state, but California Indians are a small percentage of that. We're outnumbered on many levels. And so I really think that it's important to think about partnership, listen to the partners. There's a lot legally required of consultation. A lot of legislation is passed and it just adds "and tribes." And so you end up with situations where there's funding available, but tribes don't qualify for it because of the definitions were not created in a way that they were consulted or heard. And so I think it's really important that we work together, but we're not tokenized. We share communities, and many of us are not just tribal, we're many other things, right? And unfortunately, the way that the census is structured, which is inherently underfunded in tribal communities, if you mark anything other than American Indian, you're not counted. So for us who are multiple things, if we mark that, we're not counted as Native people. So there's a lot that contributes to erasure. Often when I get invited to diversity, equity, inclusion boards, I ask, well, how are you counting your Native American people? And they said, well, we use the federal definition. Well, the federal definition is based on a colonial definition of blood quantum that's meant to erase us, not for Indian. The federal government never assumed Indians would still be here or have economic success in 2022. Their goal was to get rid of them. So I think it's really important that we're not tokenized, and we're invited to do blessings, to offer prayers, and that's wonderful. That's a very important part of our value system. However, we don't get invitations beyond that into the boardroom. And we need to be in the boardroom. We need to be making decisions that impact our ancestral territory and our communities. Thank you.
Recently, I was in a Zoom meeting, and it was a working group. I forgot specifically what it was, but one of the questions that the group, the small chat room we're tasked with is to answer the question, why is the African American community not doing well in school? I think something to that effect. And the strategy started flying. They were really good strategies, right? Feeding them. They need, some social services. And I think we were starting drilling down. I was getting excited. I was like, yeah, those are really good strategies, really good ideas. And there was about maybe 12, 15 people in this chat room, and there was not one African American in that chat room. Great ideas, great, which we assume, all with data, right? This is what the data says. And no African American was in the room. So I think that making decisions, planning, and strategy without the people that are going to be affected, you cannot move forward with the plan unless the people who are being affected are in the room as well. It goes back to Ms. Lynn was saying. And I think what Crecer Capital is that a lot of conversations happen around economic development, around economic inclusion, financial security, investment in small businesses, and small businesses or economic institutions, like I said, are not at the table. And so we're part of that solution.
May I add just something really quickly in light of Hispanic Heritage Month, that personally, an organization that I've been working with for the last 3 years, they have been so inclusive in making sure the Latino community gets access and resources. And I want to give it to Sonoma Clean Power, who's been amazing. Believe it or not, they funded a telenovela to educate folks that hopefully it's going to be coming out later on this year. But thank you, Sonoma Clean Power, for that. That's culturally approaching the Latino community.
So the cue cards tell me that we've run out of time, but I do want to do one final round robin, everybody on the panel to share any words of inspiration or messages. We also have a request from the audience. If you can share a message in Spanish, if you're so inclined, that would be welcome. Juan, in your message, if you can address whether Crecer works with the undocumented community, and you do work with small businesses in Napa, you can answer in your message. Pero este mensaje es para todos los que pidieron en español. Ellos son los líderes de ustedes. Frecuentemente no se miran en el podio, están atrás de las cortinas haciendo el trabajo duro, pero ellos están aquí para ustedes. Entonces espero que tomen tiempo después de este evento para platicar con los líderes que ha escuchado, no tan solamente en este panel, pero en los demás también. So I'll hand it over to everybody to have a message.
So I want to answer the questions real quick. So if for Crecer, you can open up a bank account with an I-10. And if you can open up a bank account, you're eligible for a La Luz Crecer Capital loan. I still have my La Luz. So fresh. The other thing too, I just want to make sure that the impact of the ARPA, especially around, is you guys understand what the impact is, because for me it's big. So we have a hardship fund led by Sally Lopez. They receive funds to do small business grants to small businesses that need $400, $500 to pay the electrical bill. That's the level of impact that ARPA funding got. She received a good amount. Go talk to Sally. She's over there. She'll let you know how to access that. The other thing that we got is our Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. If I'm not mistaken, for 41 years have been operating in Sonoma County without an executive director, all volunteer. What this ARPA does is seed funds for the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce to hire their first executive director after 41 years in Sonoma County. We do have the SBDC, and the work that Luis and Peter are doing are strong, but also the recognition that we needed to have a Latino-focused educational program. And so the ARPA funds seeded Latinx Hub, which will be expanding services in Spanish for the Latino small businesses in Sonoma County. And lastly, obviously, Crecer, launching and seeding a future CDFI for the community. That impact, along with that partnership, will be riding into the future. So I just want to make sure I pointed that out.
My dad founded our museum back in 1996. I lost him in 2020, so kind of hard to talk about it. Big shoes to fill. But he's the one that twisted my arm and made me go to law school, and I didn't understand why at the time. But he was someone who grew up on reservation up in Ukiah, didn't have much, was sent on relocation, worked as a police officer. I think he was the first California Indian highway patrolman. But he was very traumatized by a lot of the work that he did as a policeman. And he also saw injustice. And he decided to become a lawyer. When I was born in 1973, he graduated from law school. And so every time I complained about law school, he said, well, try having 8 mouths to feed, because I'm the youngest of 8. So I never got too far on complaints with him. But he taught me that, education is self-determination, and that no matter what happens to you in your life, you have your education, and you can always succeed, you can always achieve, you can always go further, you can pick yourself up and move on. And so I've tried to instill that in my children and the young Native community, which with ARPA funds, I think we have 10 POMO, young people under 30, 10 POMO people working for us now at the museum. So I really think it's about education and innovation and looking at our future. And I'm very inspired by the work that our young people do on food sovereignty and policy work and ancestral gathering rights. And I'm just very inspired and optimistic to see what they will create. And so with education as our foundation, I think we can go really far. So thank you.
And I've been getting flashcards from this guy to stop. But really quick, the time right now to open up a business for small businesses in our BIPOC community is now. There's so many resources. We got this funding that's incredible. So if you are thinking about opening up a business, the time is definitely now. En español, para todos aquellos que quieran abrir su negocio, el tiempo es ahora. No tienen que esperar. Hay suficientes fondos para todos, para que los guíen. Hay muchos talleres que se vienen. Así es de que estén alertas para todo eso. Chamber of Commerce, Alma McGuire, you've done incredible work around the pandemic, so thank you so much for that. But yes, the time is now, and thank you. Most importantly, thank you for Los Cien for giving us this platform to do that. Herman and team, you guys are wonderful, and thank you so much for this platform.
Thank you, Herman.
Thank you to Hector, to Nikki, to Juan. A round of applause. Thank you. These are your leaders.
You know that in your program there is a QR code that's got all of the bios of all of the speakers. And if you register for the event, we're going to email you the scorecard. And this presentation is being recorded and will be available shortly. So at this time, I would like to invite Carrie Fugit for our last panel, focused on creating a path towards BIPOC unity. We talked about how important it is to build stronger coalitions, looking at how we can leverage our resources and support. So, Carrie, I'll invite you and your panel to come up now.
Good morning, everybody. I definitely don't need that stool. We have had such a packed morning. We really appreciate all of the amazing panels and conversations this morning looking at recovery to restructuring. And this panel I'm personally really excited about because we're looking at restructuring really at a foundational root of restructuring our relationships, restructuring how we relate to each other, and restructuring how we build multiracial unity and working together to move forward. So this panel is looking at how we can move towards Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian American, Pacific Islander, racial, multiracial unity and addressing issues of common concern. It's been a pretty common theme this morning of how these issues interweave across different racial groups. And so coming together is really important. And the first step of that is addressing root causes. It is well known that race as a social construct was created to divide people by skin color and used to pit different racial groups against each other as a way to distract from people in power. Today is about beginning to rebuild these relationships to work towards equity, pride, and belonging for all. I invite us to take a little pause for a breath. We've had a long morning, so the last panelist, we did a stretch. I invite a little breath and grounding as we go into this last conversation. Convening this conversation, and even the practice of taking a moment to pause and breathe and settle our bodies before we lean into courageous conversations, is itself an important step towards building multiracial unity. So I am really honored to invite and speak with our panelists today, and join me in welcoming Kirsten Lange, President of NAACP Santa Rosa, Sonoma County. Ozzy Jimenez, Mayor of City of Healdsburg. And Julie Kawahara, Consultant and owner of Kawahara and Associates. So our first question is really starting with why. Why do we need this conversation? And how have your own personal identities influenced your sense of self, lived experiences, and personal desire to lean into these courageous conversations? And Kirsten, we'll start with you.
Sure thing. I had the great privilege of growing up in a very diverse family. While what you see and how I identify is Black, my family is, we jokingly call ourselves the United Nations. The food, the languages, the cultural lessons that I had the very privilege to endure growing up have informed me with the lens that everybody's family was like that. But when I went to school and someone told me to go back to Africa, I realized that that wasn't a natural occurrence for everyone else around me. My neighborhood in San Diego was extremely diverse. Folks from all over the world who ensured that not only as kids we understood the importance of celebrating one another, but that we did it with honor, respect, and love. That root and that upbringing has been instrumental in how I lead and how I live my life. I love learning about people and their stories, and for those that I get to know personally, know that I ask you those things all the time because I genuinely am interested in people, because I was taught that that's how you connect and that's how you build relationships. When I came to Sonoma County, however, that wasn't the occurrence. And through my 10 years of residency here, I've had the opportunity to understand some of the historical perspectives. And one of the things that has really stood out for me was community is not always connected. And so I've spent the last bit of my work really trying to forge authentic relations and partnerships, because the better we are connected, the less we are divided, and the more that we can uphold and uplift one another. The previous panelist mentioned being in a room where everybody's talking about ideas and no one Black was present. That has to stop. We have to make a concerted effort to ensure that everybody is able to be at the table, make decisions, and roll out these programs and initiatives together, because they impact everyone differently. And when we're all uplifting the things that challenge us, it makes it better for us together. And that has really informed how I've continued to try to uplift our NAACP branch and the issues that impact Black community. Because if you have not taken a look at the portrait of Sonoma, I urge you to look at the data that is negatively impacting the Black resident lived experience here.
Thank you.
Can you repeat the question?
Why is this conversation needed, and how has your own personal lived experiences and your own identity show up in why you're motivated to have this conversation and lean into this issue of building multiracial unity?
Such a broad and big question, right? When I first agreed to join this panel, I was thinking about, what's my contribution going to be to the discussion? And so I was thinking about, which hat am I going to wear? Am I going to wear my entrepreneurship hat? Am I going to wear my nonprofit hat? Or am I going to wear my mayor's hat? And so I think in this discussion, you'll get a little bit of everything. And so, I recognize a lot of people in the room, and there are folks that I don't recognize. But I also wanted to use this as an opportunity to share with you a little bit of my lived-in experience as a resident of 35 years here in Sonoma County. And so when I was a young child, my father worked in the Central Valley as an onion farmer. And so he saved up money to bring our family over from Mexico. I vividly remember spending a couple of evenings with my father in an immigration enforcement cell on the Tijuana border. My life has been challenging. I grew up in poverty. When we first came to Santa Rosa, we lived in South Park. And so even though I'm the mayor of the city of Healdsburg, I really love that I have this intersection of what it means to live in Santa Rosa, what it means to live in an affluent community like Healdsburg. And so, I think for me, part of the reason why I'm here today is because of the movement of Black Lives. I was appointed during the movement after George Floyd was brutally murdered. And so I knew when I joined City Council that I wasn't going to be a warm seat. I wanted to create policy and manifest change within our city. And I'm proud of it. I want to give a shout out to the Healdsburg City Council that they're all here today supporting us and supporting this conversation. And, we've been able to accomplish together so many things in Healdsburg in such a short period of time. Growing up marginalized as a brown person, as a Latinx, Latina, as a LGBTQ person, I have a firm understanding of the needs in our community. And my experience in nonprofit and business helps inform me. But I'm really proud of what we've been able to do. You know, we established our first transitional housing shelter in North County, right? Like, that has never happened before. In my experience of living in Sonoma County, I've seen every city step up to the plate to address, you know, our housing situation with our unsheltered folks. We were able to do universal basic income for 50 families. We established an equity task force to engage our community about how our city can better serve them. And so I'm here today because I'm looking at, you know, the challenges that we're all facing together, but then also how can we manifest impact, right? So that we can, you know, not just talk about the issues, but have tangibility to better support people who need the help. Thank you.
So I think the why question is super important. Why we do what we do, where we come from, who we are, the stories that we share or the stories that we don't share. Like my counterparts here on this panel, which I'm honored to be with, I too had an aha moment in my life. I grew up in the Midwest in a very white, lower middle class neighborhood. We were one of two families that were Asian, and the other second family was only Hapa Asian, half Asian. So we were definitely a minority. I grew up thinking that I wanted to be like the blonde Barbie doll that I couldn't be, and knew I was different. When I was in high school, I discovered that my parents were interned as a result of Executive Order 9066 during World War II. I didn't know that. My parents didn't tell me about their history, and I was shocked. I was like, why didn't you talk about this? And I think that's a shame that we don't share the stories of our origins and the injustices that were done to our people. Similarly, going up through high school and into college, I was still remained fairly naive because, of course, curriculum doesn't necessarily address all of the injustices that our country has leveled against all of our people. So I learned to keep my head down, get good grades, follow the rules. You know, you've heard of the model minority. I was one of those and thought, how wonderful that I'm one of those, because I can succeed and I can, you know, kind of rise through the ranks and be successful in everything that I do. You know, that's really a myth. It's another social construct that was developed to oppress other people. And that's a lesson that I learned as well, kind of late in life. So it just goes to show you that you can keep on learning, you can keep on exploring. I appreciate Nicole's comment or Nikki's comment about, you know, taking the initiative to learn about other people and other people's history and the stories. And really the why for me is the conclusion to the why is raising each other's voices. Really about telling our stories and sharing what we need and the impacts, as Ozzy has said. You know, we really need to understand how one decision might be beneficial to one segment of our community, yet not be beneficial to another segment of our community. And to me, that's also unsatisfactory. So really it's about raising voices, making the table bigger, being more inclusive as opposed to exclusive, which is kind of unfortunately part of the fabric of our culture to some degree, is to be exclusive. So that's why I'm here. So thank you.
So this conversation was really inspired by some of the data coming out of the Portrait of Sonoma. And there's been a lot of conversation about data this morning and how data can actually erase communities as a whole. And data also highlighted there's a lot of areas of commonalities around issues that different communities face in Sonoma County. So Kirsten, would love to start with you sharing your experiences with data in the Portrait of Sonoma County.
Sure thing. In 2020, when NAACP and the Sonoma County Black Forum came together to look at how we could program build, we were confronted in every meeting from community members, well, what does the data tell you? Well, we had anecdotes from elders, and for us, that was enough. But unfortunately, bureaucracy and business practice, you have to have numbers and tangible details. And so we quickly wrangled Alegria and her team for a meeting to talk about why we were not included in the Portrait of Sonoma. Black folks were not included in the Portrait of Sonoma. So we get to the meeting to talk about how to prepare for the 2021 release. And in that meeting, the statistician was so proud of all the work that was done. And when we expressed our concern about not being included, she, and I quote, said, "Well, you're not statistically significant." In the movement for Black lives, right, in the world, a person proudly exclaimed, "We were not statistically significant enough to be included." What she was not prepared for were the 9 other women on that call with me who came with a tangible task. We were to be included in the Portrait of Sonoma because we not only need numbers, we need for everyone else who program builds to recognize that there's disparity here. One of the key highlights that has come out of this Portrait of Sonoma is that the life expectancy of Black residents is 10 years lower than any group. So I look at my parents and I quickly ask them, what's your retirement plan? Does it not include Sonoma County? Are you guys gonna still go to Arizona? Because I recognized the systemic issue that it posed. This place has been a detriment to the livelihood of a demographic that has been ignored because people have deemed the population so small that it was not important enough to pay attention to the disparity that people are experiencing. Sit with that. So I want to be very clear. For every conversation we continue to have in community moving forward, it is because of the data we now have to clearly present. But now, not only do I want you to sit with the discomfort of what I've just shared, and there's plenty more, I need you to program and freedom dream, as my friends on the margins often exclaim, how you are going to work with us to build up the community so that in the next Portrait of Sonoma, we can start to measure where there's been change. And that is what's important enough to sustain and collectively work together to ensure that all of us can thrive and that all of us can be successful and that all of us have information. But it was really the root of sitting in a space and having someone be very clear, it doesn't matter enough. And data for the Indigenous population is even less captured, right? So you have another group deemed statistically insignificant, and it's not being captured in a way that, to the point of Nicole's session earlier, that we're not paying attention to what people are experiencing in their lives. And if this is the happy, liberal, beautiful wine country place, not everybody gets the experience to live such a big dream, because there are so many folks enduring the burdens of the systems that have been put into place. And if we do this together, we can unpack that and we can unearth that. And even in the most uncomfortable moment, be able to think together about how we tackle for change and the betterment of all community. And that means we have to work together.
Wow, yeah, thanks, Kirsten. Talk about statistically insignificant. We are also one of those groups. The Asian American population here in Sonoma County is about 21,000, according to last census, a little over 4% of the population. So when it comes to services, comes to funding, comes to any kind of allocation, there's nothing out there. So we're in good company, unfortunately, and with our Native brothers and sisters as well, which is why I feel very honored that we were even invited to speak here before you, that Los Cien had the forward thinking to say, hey, all of our brothers and sisters need to be in the room and need to be part of this conversation. So the lack of data, As I mentioned earlier, sort of the lack of education on our collective history is really what's missing here for me when we talk about issues of common concern. And I just want to share with you a short story of again, some of my discovery, and that is that in my recent travels across the country, I did a tour through the South, and I started, and after Black Lives Matter movement erupted, I started learning more about like Black Wall Street and learning about the aftermath of Katrina down in New Orleans and how the Black communities have, I should be speaking about the Asian community, about the Black community, but anyway, how communities come together. When the mainstream community doesn't take care of you, your community sticks together. You find each other. You find country of origin or even tribe of origin or community of origin. You find people who are like you. And you bond together and you form community. You develop businesses because nobody wants to have you in their business. Nobody wants to sell you their goods or provide the services to you. So you create your own economic system, so to speak. And then those systems, when they're successful, for some reason, somehow, they get blown up. They get blown up by whether it's acts of violence against you, they get blown up by natural disasters, and you're the last community to get that assistance. Like when I discovered the aftermath of Katrina, and I'm sure this is common in other places in our country or even here at home, that when Katrina displaced the Ninth Ward, the African American community in the Ninth Ward, that was held together so tightly by church and by family and by economics, they were displaced and they had to move out of New Orleans, and they went to places like Texas or California or north, and those families were separated, and that was really the glue that held those families together and that gave them that leg up in terms of having some economic and some educational and some just success, like thriving as people. So it's really a shame. I think we really need to look at the patterns of how policies and patterns of how distribution and attention is fostered upon communities that are always hit the hardest when disaster strikes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for raising community cohesion. And I also want to hold some space around statistically insignificant. Thank you, Kirsten. When you are not counted, you are invisible, right? And so in the nonprofit sector, we're constantly assessing needs in communities so that we can better serve them. In the civic environment for municipalities, we're trying to see how we can better serve our constituents. But if you aren't counted, you don't exist. And what's really interesting about the portrait of Sonoma was that, I appreciate you, raising this issue around Black folks not being statistically insignificant. I want to remind folks in this room that Latinos, Latinx, Latina individuals, we are not a monolith. I know you've heard this before, right? We are not a monolith, right? We're all diverse. We have our own diverse identities. I will tell you this, though. In the portrait of Sonoma, LGBTQ people were not counted. Sonoma County has the largest population of LGBTQ families outside of San Francisco, and we were invisible in the portrait of Sonoma. So I just want to take time and space to honor the work that needs to get done in this county, in these communities. The pandemic was very difficult for trans youth. As you all know, the suicide rates for trans folks is a lot higher. Black trans women, very high. And so it's important that we better these processes and that we don't just, we completed the portrait of Sonoma, we've assessed the data, we have an understanding of what Latino people face. Well, what about Latino gay people, right? What about Latin trans folks? They exist here in Sonoma County. We may not see them in these spaces, but they do exist. When I think about common issues of concern around different racial groups in Sonoma County, and why I appreciate being on this panel is because we're not talking enough to each other. You mentioned community cohesion, And geographically, we're spread apart in Sonoma County. What happens in North County is very different than happens in Santa Rosa, in Petaluma. And so that is part of, I think, the work that we're doing, why I appreciate Los Cien leaning into these conversations, because this is where it starts, where you know, the understanding. I hope you all walk away, you know, thinking about how can we better serve not only BIPOC people, but also LGBTQ people that live in this county and contribute to the economic success of our county. So yeah.
Can I just add?
Yeah.
Having lived in other communities, I've lived in Oakland, I lived in Los Angeles, I grew up in San Diego, and I work in Marin in another capacity. This work can be done because it happens right in the next county south of us. They fully fund their Office of Equity. That office has 9 full-time employees. 9 that can work with all departments and help the county structure and community be able to thrive. So I invite you, if you have not already, to encourage our leaders here to put the money behind the structures so that we can see the progression that needs to be made. Because while what we're saying sounds really like hopeful, it can be done. The dollars need to be invested into community.
So you're making this sound real easy. We just need to work together, right? There's a clear why. There's a lot of issues of common concern. Ozzy, let's start with you. What are some of the challenges to building this multiracial unity? And in particular, we're curious, what can the role of folks like myself, of the white identity, do in helping?
Great question. Interesting. So challenges to BIPOC unity. Challenges within our communities of color that we share. I learned this Mayan proverb from the playwright Luis Valdez, who started El Teatro Campesino, which is a farm worker theater. And I learned this word from him, and it means En Lakesh, which means you are my other me. And so whatever hat I'm wearing in business, you know, civic government, the nonprofit sector, I'm always thinking about how I can see myself in other people and how that's reflected back to me. So seeing their humanity, and thinking about challenges. I want to share with you a story, a unique story. You know, it was pretty public, but you know, earlier this year when I became mayor, our city was faced with challenges around a former council member who had a staunch position around anti-vaccination. As all of you know, I'm a very strong proponent for vaccines. You know, I was on the front lines with Alliance Medical Center, translating for folks, and so I saw abuelitas, abuelitos, tías, tíos, like our community of people feel relief in getting the vaccine because they could feel more comfortable to go back to work. They could continue to provide for their families. And so I saw the immediate, you know, impact of the alleviation of these people depending on the vaccine. And so when this difficult discussion came before our council, as mayor, I had to think about how is it that I see myself in this other person, because I do not have the same lived-in experience that this, and I never want to speak for a woman of color, that's not my place, but I want to share my story. And so I saw myself in her. I reflected that back to myself. And I understood that I do not have the Black experience of an Afro-Latina to understand her perspective of her community facing over the years experimentation and testing on Black and brown bodies. I did not have that same lived-in experience that she had, but I had to honor her experience. Even though it was very difficult and different from me, I had to come to a mutual understanding that to understand her humanity. And so she's no longer on our council, and I hope she's doing great things with her life. But that's one of the same challenges. When I say we're not a monolith, right? The BIPOC community, you can't just say Black, Indigenous, people of color. We've checked the box, right? We come to the table with our own experiences, our own lived-in history, and we have to honor that. You know, as it relates to Caucasian folks, you know, I think practice in Lakesh. When you're in these spaces, when these conversations can be difficult, honor your own courage and don't be fearful, but practice that. How are you seeing your humanity in other people? So yeah, thank you.
I think that's so wonderful, Ozzy, and just in my work in the nonprofit sector, I've been very fortunate to be invited in to work with various groups that I don't have lived experience with. So I was able to journey with and work side by side with LGBTQ organizations, and that's how I met Ozzy and his partner Christian, was through the Positive Images organization. Primarily working through the county mental health system and also working with Sonoma County Indian Health, the Community Baptist Church Collaborative, and Los Cien and Latino service providers. I've had the advantage of working in these organizations and really developing a capacity for understanding and as you said, sort of seeing the humanity in other folks and their experiences and what they've journeyed through, which I think has given me so much more compassion and empathy for people's experiences. And I think it really does take that courage to, I mean, I have been fortunate because it was part of my work, but I also think about, I get a lot of invitations to go to events. Like you see, you know, you get these notices and it's like, oh, you know, Juneteenth is coming up and the African American community is getting together, and it's like, well, do I go? Like, I'm probably going to be like the only non-Black person there, and I'm not going to really know that many people there. But hey, you know, you go, you show up, they're so welcoming, you just become part of the community, and the more that you do it, the easier it gets. And I think that really taking that courageous step of being uncomfortable and out of your box is super important for our growth, our mutual growth, and our mutual understanding of how we are just one big glob of humanity, you know, going through our day-to-day with our common struggles and our common successes. Just something specific to the AAPI community, and going back to the issue of data, there are these hidden communities here in Sonoma County, and I'm still learning as well. I had the benefit of working with the Fijian community when my parents were still with us and they were elderly and needed some care. And the Fijian community has a very strong caregiving network. And so I learned a lot about the Fijian community through them. I've been working with Grace, who's our resident photographer here, and the ARPA grant that the Asian American Pacific Islander Coalition of the North Bay is a part of, and they're looking at the Vietnamese nail salons. And so there's that community. And we oftentimes don't see these communities unless we happen to patronize them, or we happen to go to church and we see them, or, you know, we happen to have relatives or friends. And so they're very hidden pockets of these communities. And again, as we've been talking about, the data doesn't reflect these communities. Oftentimes you'll see some surveys or demographic forms that will actually break down the different AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander groups. But sometimes people don't want to take the time to ask the question. I've been a little kind of shocked and disappointed that some segments of our county the employees don't want to take the time to answer the questions. And I get it, that really they want to kind of get to their work, whether it's like, I'm a clinician and I want to just do my therapy. I don't want to do this intake form that like has like 20 different ethnicities on it and ask them, you know, all these different questions about, you know, that or their, you know, sexual orientation or, you know, their sexual identity or gender identity. And so it's like, I get that, but it is so important to the people that we serve that we count them and that we see them. And I think those are really the challenges too with the AAPI community. We're so diverse. There's language diversity, there's immigration diversity, there's cultural differences and customs, and we all are kind of segmented. We all are focused on our own particular area of affinity. That to go outside of that area of affinity takes a lot of time and intention. And I think that that's one of the challenges that I think I personally face and that hopefully some of you can identify with as well.
I would say the challenge I've observed most is just not being thought of to be included, right? NAACP, a national organization, and having a local branch, were we at certain meetings? Were we at certain brunches? Were we at certain celebrations, right? Because our advocacy goes beyond the Black community, and it's to be of service to everyone and to engage and to help mutually exchange resources and information. And much like my friends have shared, we are not all the same, right? Our lived experiences are different. I didn't grow up here. My great-grandmother came here, so that's a familial tie, but it's not like I can say I knew what it was like to be in a school here. And those nuances are important to be elevated and honored in all of the spaces that we navigate. But if we're not even taking the time to recognize who's not been included in the room, and I know I'm one person and I'm not signing up to be invited to everything, but there are other folks with just as much energy who want to be included and involved in the good work that we are all doing. But if we're not even thought of, right, or if it's an afterthought, you send the note later, we have to then step back to think about how genuine it is and how authentic we want to be in building and fostering those relationships with one another. And discomfort aside, imagine what it's like to be like me, as Ozzy has shared. Think about what it's like when I go into a store. I know if I bring my big tote bag, I'm going to be followed. I know that if I bring my brother with his tattoos and exposure, we're going to really be followed and asked 5 times if we need help. So when you think about that weight that folks are carrying to just exist in a world where you maybe never have to think about those things, imagine what it's like when you can just freely breathe and move about just as you would like. And I think it's important to uplift and be honest and open that it is important for us to do this together, because as we all elevate and amplify one another in an authentic way, not to be tokenized, we can be better for it, and we can close those gaps that we often see when folks are saying, well, we can't find people. Well, if everybody that lives here talks about how hard it is, do you think folks would want to come here? And so when we step back and dial it in, we got to think about how we are a part of creating the community and the spaces that we want folks to navigate just as freely as some of us get to.
If I could add as well, my colleague here mentioned the word tokenizing, and I just want to say for young people out there who are thinking about engaging in the civic environment in the nonprofit world or starting their own businesses, be mindful of tokenism, but also be mindful of anyone that tells you, would you like a seat at the table? And pause, because guess what? You can build your own table, right? So I just want people to remember that, and so thank you for raising that.
So that was a great transition to our closing question, is some words and wisdom of advice. How do we make a path forward? How can we move this conversation to the next step? If you can offer one gem of wisdom to leave with our audience, what would that be?
Okay. That's like one gem of wisdom. I was like, okay, I had a few, but okay, let me just see if I can find the one. You know, I really think it is about raising our voices. I grew up not making waves. I grew up saving face. You know, saving face in the Asian culture means don't embarrass yourself and don't embarrass anybody else. So to confront somebody. When I receive a microaggression, sometimes I didn't even know what that was. I would just kind of laugh it off or say, thank you, like, thanks for that insult, But, I think now that my awareness is growing and I'm coming into my own, I think it's really important that we speak up. I think it's important that we share that voice and encourage others to speak up. The courage that it takes to do that sometimes is really, really challenging for some of us because we think, oh, we're going to insult our boss, or oh, we're going to insult that person, or oh, we're going to offend them, when we're the recipients of being offended. So I think really, again, it's raising our voices. It's raising our voices in a way that can be constructive, that can pave the way for decisions to be made in a more equitable fashion, in a way that assures representation and not tokenism, and that models for the next generation to come. So that would be my 2 cents.
So I'll be brief. How do we move forward? And as a baseline, fund programs, fund nonprofits doing the work in our communities already servicing people who are vulnerable and marginalized. Fund community-based organizations doing the important work. Fund small businesses. Fund women in businesses, building businesses. I feel like that's how we move forward. I was really appreciative of the conversation from Juan Hernandez, right? We can talk about scaling a business all we want day in and day out, but if we don't have access to capital as a small business, nothing will manifest. I think the work that Crecer Capital is doing is something that's tangible for our community. So I know that there's a lot of leaders in this room, and so I encourage you to do that. How do we move forward? Fund those programs. Thank you.
We move forward by leaving rooms like this and getting to work. That's it.
Can I just like to add one more thing, and that is to have gratitude for those that are doing the work. I heard some nice nuggets, and even though our governor was a bit of a butt of a joke today, he did have some nuggets in there that I learned about, and especially around women's reproductive health. I was like, here. So I was like compelled, like I need to go tell him thank you for that, because I think gratitude goes a long way, and letting leaders who are doing the right thing, give them some love, because you want more of that leadership. So that's the other thing I just wanted to add.
Beautiful. Well, speaking of love, let's give our panelists a lot of love. Thank you so much for your courage and this conversation. May the conversations continue and the work get bigger. Yes. So thank you.
All right, folks, thank you so much for staying until the very end. What an inspirational morning this has been, and what an important call to action that we have before us. We've learned so much. We've recognized that there are neighbors that are doing similar work or that are in this common challenge of how we bring community together. We have an opportunity to plug into those networks, to learn from them, and for them to learn from our experience here in Sonoma County. We know the importance that investments can make in truly transforming the future outlook and trajectory of our small businesses. We have to continue to do more of that and fund those organizations that are truly serving those in most need. And perhaps more importantly, we heard about a path forward for how we build multiracial unity. It is about allowing ourselves to sit and understand the other, to really think about and recognize that for so long we have been divided. And what I mean by that is that the structures that we have, whether it be having us compete for scraps or resources, that we no longer have to buy into that construct. And as I said earlier, this pandemic has blown up those constructs. And we have a tremendous opportunity together to continue to move this work forward. For Los Cien, the work begins tomorrow. It is really about how do we take everything that we've learned here today and make it actionable. As Kirsten said, how do we get to work? So we didn't want to assume that we could have a state of the BIPOC community, because we recognize that there's a lot of work that goes into building trust, in understanding who the other groups are, and allowing ourselves to naturally come to that conversation. So we are going to be working to create those opportunities. We learned that there are new ways of funding programs and organizations. We don't want to make those episodic or one-time investments. What we're learning is that we can actually fundamentally change the way in which we fund organization in a way that leads to better results and outcomes. And perhaps most importantly, we have a moral responsibility to make sure that some of our groups are no longer invisible. That we have a responsibility through the resources that we have to get better data collection in our community, to make sure that we lift up their concern and that we make their issues real, and no more can they be statistically insignificant. That is our charge. But we can't do this alone. We need you. We need you to stand up and to say, I want to be part of this important movement. I want to make sure that the future generation can benefit from the hard work that we did today. And we got to do a lot of hard work. We cannot afford for our community to suffer in the ways it suffered during the pandemic. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our community, and we owe it to the next generation. So stay connected with Los Cien and be part of this movement and this important work. Thank you for joining us and being part of this movement. Have a good morning.